Hello and welcome to Purely Academic, your potentially educational podcast. This is the monthly stuff for July 2025. I'm Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies. I teach cinema studies at the University of Colorado. And our silent podcast co-host Phoebe, aka my dog, turns 10 years old this week.
And I'm Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night. And I'm really looking forward to our podcast topic today, where we're just doing a clip show where we're looking back at the top 10 moments in the history of our podcasts that featured our silent co-host, Phoebe the dog.
There are at least 10. I usually edit them out because they involve her barking very loudly. No. Phoebe, because it's her birthday, you know how, Sean, when you and I turned 30, we did where we got to request a podcast topic and the other person had to do it? Phoebe has requested that, and she wants to do a ranking of the top 10 dog treats, so we'll do that later today.
Great. I'm looking forward to eating a bunch of dog treats as a human. That's an experience that I want to have.
Well, no, you don't get it. She's a dog. All her favorite treats are human food.
Yes. Actually, right? No, yes. That's a good point. Yes.
Yeah. Mainly like things like peanut butter and bread and stuff like that.
I mean, really, it's just like whatever's the thing like most certain to kill her if she eats, I'm sure is number one. It's just that temptation, you know? I feel like that's always the thing with pets is that like it's the one thing that if they eat, they will die instantaneously, and they're like, I must have it.
It's very true, but she has not died. She is 10. She's doing good, hanging out on my bed, as she usually is when we're recording these podcasts. So, happy birthday, Phoebe. But let's move on. Today is a jam-packed episode. For our news section, we'll be talking about all the massive layoffs at Xbox and the future of the James Bond franchise. We have stuff to talk about, including I have now spent, as of today, when we're recording this on July 6th, a full month with the Nintendo Switch 2, so we've got a lot of that to talk about. And we have a monthly 10 about superhero movies that could exist in the multiverse if we had the power to control the multiverse. And so there's going to be some crazy stuff on this here episode of the show. But Sean, how have you been up to? How have you been doing? What have you been up to?
How have I been up to? I have been up to very well. It's we're in the middle of summer break, and that's just a great feeling. It is. Yeah. It is like the time in your life as a high school teacher where you're like, it's all worth it. The hell of the school year. It just gets kind of wash away bit by bit over the course of the summer. But now it's that horrifying realization of you're halfway through the break. And so then it's like, well, now it's just all shrinking from here. You're past that 50% point. And so you're just now have to live with the anxiety of eventually not having a break anymore.
I'm sorry, but it seems like you've been productive based on what you have on the outline for your stuff. It looks like you've been playing a lot of video games, as have I.
Oh, I've been doing so much stuff. Like I had to limit how much I put on our stuff list. It's like I've been doing too much shit. I've got to focus it down into something that would fit into a podcast.
Nice. Well, let's go ahead and get started with the news so we can get the depressing shit out of the way before we talk about the fun things we've been doing. So, Sean, let's start with the Xbox news, because this was the big news last week, that Xbox announced over 9,000 layoffs. This is their fourth, I believe, big round of layoffs just in the last 2 years. These layoffs also included multiple high-profile game cancellations and studio closures. So I'll go through some. This is by no means exhaustive, but here are some of the big ticket items, and then I will let you react, Sean.
Yeah.
At Rare, the developers of games like Donkey Kong Country back in the day, and at Xbox they did Sea of Thieves, which is one of the few big hits Xbox has had in the last 10 years. The fantasy game Everwild was canceled. This was originally announced 6 years ago. Greg Mayles, who was directing that game and had been with the company for 35 years, working on games like Battletoads, Donkey Kong Country, in addition to directing Banjo-Kazooie and Sea of Thieves, left the company after this announcement. So, just kick out the guy who directed one of your only, hits of the last 10 years. Great idea. Perfect Dark had a reboot scheduled that was going to be created by this studio that they formed in 2018 called The Initiative. The Initiative was shut down and the Perfect Dark reboot was canceled. The Initiative never shipped a game. Turn 10, the developers of Forza Motorsport, the original race sim flavor of Forza, was massively reduced. 50% of its workforce was laid off, and Forza has been effectively canceled as a series. Turn 10 will be turned into support staff for future Forza Horizon titles, so it does not sound like Xbox has plans to continue with the original flavor of Forza. ZeniMax, their unannounced MMO codenamed Blackbird was canceled, and ZeniMax Online Studio president Matt Furore stepped down after this. Multiple stories indicate that the project was coming together well, and execs internally, including Spencer, were very impressed, but it was shut down. Romero Games, this is John Romero's studio, the original developer of Doom. They are an independent studio not owned by Xbox, but Xbox was funding a new shooter by Romero Games, and it's reported that not only was that funding pulled, but the entire team at Romero Games had to be laid off because now they have no money. King Mobile Gaming laid off 10% of their workforce, but Phil Spencer and Matt Booty still somehow have their jobs, and Xbox Game Studios publishing exec Matt Turnbull suggested that laid-off staff turn to generative AI to find new jobs. Quote, I've been experimenting with ways to use LLM AI tools like ChatGPT or Copilot to help reduce the emotional and cognitive load that comes with job loss. I think this person should be boiled in acid. Fuck all of this.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just for that broader context to keep in mind of they have since basically 2023 or late 2022, they have almost clockwork at Microsoft broadly speaking, and then Xbox specifically, for what we're concerned with. Every 6 months they've had huge layoffs. Obviously they've done things like shut down other game studios before, like Tango Gameworks after Hi-Fi Rush came out. I know Tango has kind of been pseudo-resurrected after the fact outside of Xbox. But just point being, if you feel like you're getting deja vu when we're talking about this again, and you're seeing these news stories again, it's because it is just a thing that they have specifically been doing. And I think a lot of it's coinciding with this general trend across the Western game development industry of massive layoffs. Xbox is experiencing it more than anywhere else because I think you're seeing the confluence of, the Activision merger and stuff like that. And back in the day, the ZeniMax one, that there's still lots of that sort of more kind of expected redundancy layoff kind of stuff you're getting. I think you're still seeing that. Some other elements of what we know were layoffed with this round with Xbox were a lot of people working in Europe in advertising and marketing and distribution and that kind of stuff. And that's one of the big sectors that was hit as well. And that's probably a lot of that kind of, we're trying to thin out that whole, the duplicated jobs they have because they've acquired so many massive companies. But the other thing that's happening here is obviously Microsoft's overall company shift to AI in order to try to just, dive headfirst into that until the fucking bubble explodes and all this shit goes south for these companies. And Microsoft is the most committed of any company, at least in any large tech company, into this AI stuff. And I think that that's another big thing you're seeing is them as a company trying to just basically thin out every one of their divisions that is not directly AI related. And so Microsoft is just making this huge shift. And as a result, they are just continuously laying off hundreds, if not thousands of people every 5 to 6 months or so. And then now you're also seeing even more project cancellations and studio shutdowns. And it is just this sort of incredibly dire situation it's feeling like at Microsoft, broadly speaking, but very specifically Xbox, which has been floundering this whole generation. And that's where you just see this
for 2 generations, Sean.
This generation specifically, right? This generation where this administration was in charge of the whole thing, right? Phil Spencer and his team, they can't blame somebody else for bad choices made, right? It is no, you're in charge, you're the ones making the decisions, you're the one making these moves, coming up with these long-term strategies, and their long-term strategies have just been so muddled and shifting, and has ended up in this place where Xbox hardware is seemingly, effectively dying as in the form that we know it as. There was an announcement they made that they are partnering with AMD for their next generation devices, but that is also like, what is the nature of those devices is not clear. We know that they're doing their stuff with like the ROG Xbox Ally X whatever, and that idea of partnering with outside hardware manufacturers. But like, what is Microsoft / Xbox? What are they trying to do with their video game business? Is just, to me now, kind of like a mystery. And it is when you're seeing these like really kind of historic studios getting shut down or their projects getting canceled, or things like with the Initiative one, where it is this incredibly embarrassing situation where they have built up an entire studio from the ground up to make this one game, Perfect Dark. They show off last year a vertical slice, kind of old school E3 demo type thing. I know that there was some like controversy after the fact of people being like, oh, that whole demo was faked. And it's like, it wasn't faked. It was a vertical slice. It was like the original Halo 2 demo in 2003 or whatever at E3. That was like not really what that game was, but it was a vertical slice of like, this is what we want the game to be. They showed that off. It was their kind of like pillar of last year's Xbox Game Showcase. And now that game is dead. And that entire studio that was making that game is dead. And this just like, Xbox is in such a weird position where you don't know where their hardware is at, and like, what is their aims? What are they going to do with that? How are they going to fix Windows? All that kind of shit to try to make whatever their weird Windows Xbox hybrids they seem to be moving towards is. But also it's like their entire like internal Xbox Game Studios are on fucking fire, like Gears of War is probably like in a better position than a lot of their franchises, but keep in mind that they had Gears 5 that ended on some sort of like pseudo cliffhanger leading to a conclusion of that story, and like, fuck it, we're going to reboot and do a prequel, and we're just going to throw that in the garbage and redo all that shit. And that's what's happening. 343 Industries is not a thing anymore because they are now the Halo Studios. And there's been some insider stuff indicating that there has been some difficulties at Halo Studios with like shifting to Unreal and whatever projects we're working on, including some kind of seeming Halo 1 remake again, because they are already remastering their remake of Gears of War 1, so why not do that with Halo? Also, Forza Motorsport is seemingly dead as a franchise, and there's that studio Turn 10, which is one of the most historic Xbox studios, is totally gutted. It feels like Forza Horizon is like the one thing that Xbox has in its actual internal game studios division, Xbox Game Studios, that can like make a video game and have it be successful, and everything else is dead. And then they're just buoyed up by the fact that they bought multiple successful video game publishers with ZeniMax and Activision and have let them mostly run without much like interference, is kind of how I understand that their policy has been, other than every once in a while you have these massive layoffs, and then they're like, well, we know that we were kind of hands off in our approach to these studios, but now we're going to have to shut down your super promising MMO. We're also going to have to shut down your studio that made like our only successful critical hit in forever, Hi-Fi Rush, right? It is just this really bizarre situation at Xbox that makes you just kind of question, what are they trying to do here? And how is this entire game division going to survive as a broader enterprise outside of just being a third-party publisher that basically is what Activision was before they bought it, which just kind of seems like is what Xbox is slowly shifting into.
But like, if they were doing that, that would make sense. Like
yeah.
But you can't be the big third-party publisher and stop making all your games. Like this has been a problem throughout Phil Spencer's entire tenure from early Xbox One to now, is they are just categorically incapable of shipping games. They are categorically incapable of running studios effectively or smoothly or having any kind of like solid schedule. This is where I'm just like, I do not understand how this man still has his job. I do not understand like what strategy any of this is in furtherance of, because if they just wanted to move away from hardware, have a bunch of games that they publish on all the platforms, they could do that. They have plenty of studios, they have lots of games, but they need to be in a place where they can actually get shit out, and they're just perpetually. This has been a story since we started podcasting, Sean, in like 2012. It's unreal how bad they are at this, and I just... And obviously now this is all tied into the larger Microsoft conversation, where Microsoft is in a fucking death spiral with their AI shit. Windows 11 is in, like, as bad a place as Windows has pretty much ever been, to the point that, like, Steam could come in and probably kill Windows as a gaming platform any day they want. Like, if they make Steam OS something more multi-platform, and, like, because it's, like, such a good, like, have you seen those videos comparing, like, performance on handheld devices between Steam OS and Windows 11? It's, like, unreal how bad Windows is as a gaming platform now, which was, like, its one thing it kind of had going for it. And all of it's just amazing how much that entire company is in this weird death throes. And it's sad to see Xbox part of that. It is also infuriating for me that, like, every time we have one of these giant rounds of layoffs and nobody at the top suffers one fucking bit, I'm just sick of it. I cannot name another person in video gaming who has failed for so long and suffered no consequences as much as Phil Spencer. I don't think there is any analog for that. And at this point, like, that is the one that I just do not understand. And it kind of infuriates me at a certain point.
Yeah, and it has just been so long going with this shit. And seeing Xbox's strategy just sort of shift and morph over the years, but never, like, sticking with anything long enough for it to feel like real, you know? And it was the thing, like, back when, you know, they had E3s where it was always that kind of thing of, oh, every year is finally going to be the year where Xbox gets it together, and no year has ever been that. And now it's just in a position where you don't even know what that means. Like, what does it mean for Xbox to get it together? Like, what does that even look like anymore? What are they even trying to be in the video game space? It's just such a fucking mystery, because, as you say, it feels like they're trying to become effectively the largest third-party publisher in the business that has some sort of weird hardware thing on the sidelines, but they're also trying to do whatever they're trying to do with Windows. But at the same time, they seem like incapable of putting out a video game that they are in charge of. And then all these other studios that are ones that they own, but are not necessarily, like, you know, that are not, again, an Xbox game studio, but something like this ZeniMax game, that gets fucked over, even though, again, there were multiple reports, including one by Jason Schreier, after, you know, the fallout of all these layoffs became clear, that this MMO Blackbird game was super impressive, and that, like, everyone who saw it felt that that project was coming together really well, it was very well managed, and that it was an incredibly promising, almost kind of like Destiny-esque game. And that, including, like, executives at Microsoft, like Spencer, and their quotes of, like, indicating that, like, these people were hugely impressed by that project and how it was coming together, and then it's dead purely from the incompetence of their sort of corporate overlords, both in the Phil Spencer sphere and then in the Satya Nadella and the larger Microsoft sphere in their AI shift. And it's just like, what the fuck are you doing if you can't put out video games? You kill the video games from the people that you're managing, that are putting something promising together, and you're kind of abandoning your traditional hardware platform. It's like, what even are you anymore as a like business enterprise? It's just a giant mystery.
Yeah, and I just don't know how many more ways we have to say it. It's clear that also, like, Xbox fans, who, there were a lot of ride or die Xbox fans for a long time, who, anytime we talked about this, Sean, would get on, you're not on Twitter, so they would get on my case on Twitter, yes, you know, on social media about it. We would get nasty comments, stuff like that. And now that's gone. It's been amazing to watch that dry up. And now, like, I feel like those ride or die Xbox fans are angrier at Xbox than anyone, because it's like, the wool has been pulled over their eyes for so long, and finally it's like, oh, it's never happening. It's never flourishing as a platform. You know, Game Pass is never becoming the industry-changing thing it was meant to be. Like, we're never getting all these games we thought we were getting. Like, and it's just, so, like, I don't know who they're leaning on anymore either. Like, they don't have a loyal fan base anymore who's like ride or die for Xbox, I don't think, because why? How could you be at this point?
Well, when you have, like, hundreds, if not thousands, of people laid off every 6 months, and studio shutdowns, and, like, in development games getting shut down, like, how could you be excited for anything? It's like everything that Xbox puts out, or whatever they're advertising, always has to come with this huge asterisk of maybe, you know, like, yes, maybe that Fable game will come out. Like, it's, you know, anything that there's, like, any sort of conspicuous absence of it Like how that Perfect Dark reboot game was not at their most recent Xbox Game Showcase last month. It's like, well, does that indicate that was one of the ones on the fucking chopping block? Was that the sign there? Well, guess what? Fable wasn't there either. Oh no, so that Gears of War game wasn't either. Who knows? Was it not there because they have a different plan for when they want to advertise those things? Or is it not there because the project is floundering? Or is it not there because Xbox is getting ready to kill it? Who fucking knows? Like, you just have to be, if you're someone who is really committed to that platform and that's like your main like console or whatever, I feel like you just have to live with so much uncertainty about the future of what that thing is. Like, will that game library, or how much of that game library will continue forward in this new model of Xboxes that aren't Xboxes? And like, is it just going to be, if I want to play an Xbox One game in my backwards compatibility, is it going to have to be cloud streaming? All that kind of stuff. Like, you just can't have any sort of faith in whatever that platform is, in the way that, like, if you're playing on Nintendo or you're playing on Sony, or obviously if you're just, PC and on Steam, you don't have that problem. Like, you're sure that like I'm sure that Ghost of Yotei is going to come out and that game is going to be good. Like, I'm not concerned about like Sucker Punch is just going to be fucking dead in 3 months and that game just disappears. Like, that's not a thing I'm worried about. And it's just like, obviously neither Nintendo or Sony are perfect, and there are projects that end up taking forever or they end up getting canceled or whatever, but it's not like where Xbox is, where it's just, you have the fucking Grim Reaper over your shoulder at all times. And I just feel like, I think it's one of the reasons why I just have stopped watching any Xbox Game Showcase thing ever since, like, I think the first one they did post E3, I think was the last one I watched, because even at that point, there was just the sense of, I have no idea what to even expect could be a game that will eventually come out. Because a lot of those games, like Everwild and Perfect Dark, are dead. And it's like, they will never come out. And who knows if that Blade game that Arcane is making is ever going to come out, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. One of these chuckle fucks said on Twitter, I forget which Xbox person it was, who clarified, like, hey, none of the games that were shown at our 2025 showcase have been canceled. And it's like, but several of the ones from your 2024 showcase were. Yes. And, like, we all know at least one of the things you showed at 2025 will be. Like, that's not a question. One of them will be. We just don't know which one yet. Like, yes. This isn't like you fuckers, this every year. Like, what does that mean? Like, in the 2 weeks since you did your showcase, you haven't canceled anything? Oh, congratulations, you made it 2 weeks. And the other thing that, like, has to be said here also is, you made the comparison, like, Sony and Nintendo. I do need people to stop making the comparisons between Xbox and Nintendo, because Nintendo is a Japanese company that has a completely different set of laws and culture surrounding it. And, like, there's a reason why you never hear about this at Nintendo, and it's because it is a company centered in Japan, where they have different labor laws, which creates not just legal, incentives, but also, like, a culture that you don't do this. That, like, this isn't something they think about or do. You also don't have the crazy executive pay at Nintendo. Like, yes, all of these things are things Xbox could do, but they're an American company where it's the wild fucking West. And, like, the part of this is just, America sucks and our laws are terrible. But, like, that, I do need people to stop pretending that that's, like, a normal comparison. Like, part of why Nintendo has flourished in the last 15 years is because they come from a country with a very different set of laws and cultures around this, and we do not. And so our most American company, Xbox, is the one most floundering. That's not a coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff is, is kind of inseparable from that larger political landscape and Trumpism and all of that. Yeah. Like, it's all tied together. And it's like, you do see every time you have these big layoffs in the video game industry, which is horrifyingly frequent in the past several years, you do always have people trot out the example of Iwata at Nintendo, in the Wii U stuff, where he took a pay cut and all that kind of stuff, which is like, like Iwata, like, he was obviously, like, a great leader and people really respect him. He was awesome. But but it is really exhausting to see people, like, hold it up as this one great individual at Nintendo was the person who did this individual choice that we all should emulate. Is a very American way of looking at it. Rather than there's an entire social construct at Nintendo and Japan, and, like, legal and cultural elements at play there that make that, like, a choice that can even really be made. You know, like it's literally inconceivable that Phil Spencer would make that kind of move, because I don't think he would be at Xbox. Like, I think he'd be employed by Microsoft if he even tried to do it. It's just like there's a whole larger apparatus at play there, that you can't just sort of like look at the single individual people at play and the single choices those individual people make. That's part of it. That's not irrelevant, but it's one part of a much larger thing here. And that's just where you just get that sense of, you know, doom around Xbox, is that it just feels like that entire brand is hooked into Microsoft as a company that is just headed in the very techno-fascist way that basically every big tech company is, and is bulldozing its way through, ignoring any kinds of like regulations or anything like that. I mean, this is just, you know, all their ability to buy Activision, all that shit. It's all that is all tied together, and the inevitable outcome is thousands of people losing their jobs constantly. Like the interesting artistic products that company was making and funding being shuttered and destroyed and discarded, all in the name of a pursuit of sort of an imagined infinite growth curve. And currently that imagined infinite growth curve takes the form of AI, which is particularly gross because of all of its additional effects of stealing copyrighted works from people and stealing the work that people do without crediting them or benefiting them in any way, and then also slowly choking our dying planet to death, and ushering us to the extinction of the human race. You know, it's like all of that shit, it's all tied together, and then you have to constantly be reminded of it every 6 months when they trot out another 9,000 people and say good luck and kick them out into the curb.
Yeah. And, you know, y'all know our thoughts on AI, and part of that is just that you and I have been around long enough that we've seen these cycles. Yes. And like, I'm sorry, guys, AI, I saw it with VR, and I saw it with fucking Bitcoin, and like whatever else you want to name.
The metaverse. Like the metaverse went so quick that I feel like people already forget it was not that long ago that every fucking company was pivoting to the fucking metaverse. To the extent that Facebook changed its name to Meta, and we've already forgotten that was a thing that every one of these companies was obsessed with for like 2 years.
And the companies that survive and thrive are the ones that, you know, embrace much more long-term thinking. This is what Nintendo is good at, right? This is like what Apple is good at. Like, the funniest thing for me being an Apple user the last couple of years has been their fucking Apple Intelligence thing, which is so transparently, like so obviously we're doing this to get shareholders off our back, but we're not doing this because anyone wants it, because you can just, it's the easiest thing in the world. It's the opposite of Copilot. It is not like built in, like flashing lights, use this thing. It's like, just ignore this. It's almost like your Apple device starts up and whispers like, hey, we have to do the AI stuff for our shareholders, but please just ignore it. We have other plans. And I kind of fucking love that. But it is such an obvious, like, you can see the companies that are like going straight towards the iceberg and the ones that are trying to avoid the iceberg, and it's very funny to me.
Yes, but yeah, this AI thing, it's extremely frustrating, and it is like Microsoft is so wholly committed, and Xbox is just going to go down with that ship.
You know, more power to them. All right. You also had a note on here, Sean. Another piece of Xbox news, but something different. Sony is publishing their hit game Helldivers 2 for Xbox this August. Is this the first time Sony has published a game on Xbox platforms? Other than MLB The Show. Yeah,
MLB The Show would be the other thing that they have done, which obviously that is tied into like rights stuff with Major League Baseball. But I believe this is the first thing of like their own volition that they are doing that with. I mean, obviously, while this has not come out yet, like Bungie's, the whole thing when they bought Bungie was that they were going to continue to be multi-platform. So if Marathon had been out at this point, Marathon is going to be multi-platform. So we knew that like, I feel like this is just like interesting it feels like this is like where Sony's whole strategy was heading towards, is this kind of division of their live service games, which obviously that push at Sony has not been particularly successful. They've got like a couple of games like Helldivers 2, but there are a lot of graves in that fucking cemetery at this point. But it's clear that they're like, because they're doing is having their kind of more multi-platform, their like big multiplayer style games that are more live service oriented are clearly just going to go out on any platform that they can really support, because those have been day and date on PC anyways. Seemingly now they're like, we'll put it on Xbox as well. I would not at all be surprised if eventually there is a like Switch 2 version of this game, et cetera, et cetera. And they've obviously done some other things with Switch, like that Lego Horizon game came out on Switch as well. But like what I'm interested in to see is more like, what does this mean for their big first party games, or sort of like big first party story kind of games, something like a Ghost of Yotei or Intergalactic, the next Naughty Dog game, like Wolverine, all that kind of stuff. If that will ever like, I'm not expecting those to end up on Xbox, but it's just interesting to see Sony trying to figure out like where is their lane in this world, where it's become clear that, especially with PC, it is not feasible for them to be solely committed to just putting out everything only on PlayStations. But like, where else do you kind of draw those lines? And it's been interesting to see Sony try to navigate that. Because they've got stuff like that Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls game that they announced is going to be PC and PlayStation day and date. I'm curious if that eventually is also an Xbox game now. I would have said no beforehand, but if they're putting a Helldivers 2 out on Xbox, why not put out your fighting game on Xbox also? Why not put that out on Switch 2? It's just like an interesting little kind of shift you're seeing in their overall strategy.
Yeah, Xbox might make this decision for them at some point by pulling out of the console space. But for now, yes, I guess there's enough Xboxes around to... I guess it depends. I think Helldivers 2 makes sense as an Xbox game. I'm not sure, as big as it will be if Wolverine, some single-player kind of game, makes as much sense over at Xbox. At least in terms of, the money it would take to port it and all of that stuff. But, a live service shooter game, sure, why not?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me that you would want any game that, both has, your microtransaction kind of stuff that you want as many people playing as possible, but also, a game that lives and dies by having a committed audience. You want to have as many people possible that can be in that audience. So that makes sense. What I suspect their strategy is I think they're going to be committed to keeping their single-player focused titles that are kind of their premium titles, only day and date on PlayStation. Then 2 years later they come out on PC or whatever. I imagine they're going to continue to do that. I would be surprised if those ever kind of migrate outside of that. And again, eventually, the Xbox, people will seemingly not need to make dedicated Xbox versions of games potentially next generation. Because it seems like that is just not the direction Xbox is moving in as a hardware platform. Then the big question becomes, what is their attitude towards releasing stuff on Switch 2 and things like that. It will just be kind of interesting to see that develop as that platform matures.
Indeed. All right, another piece of Sony-related news. The Last of Us co-creator of both the games and then the TV show, Neil Druckmann, announced that he is leaving the HBO show. Its second season recently wrapped up, and he is focusing his energies at Naughty Dog for their upcoming game, Intergalactic, which I did not realize he was the director of, because he's been also doing all the TV stuff. So I don't know when he's been directing this, but at some point he has been. So there's a lot of ways to read this piece of news. I think we all suspect there's more to it than is being said publicly. The backstory, one thing is that Naughty Dog almost certainly is struggling not having their director there every day on the game that they need to ship. So that makes sense to me. Also, the HBO show had I think, frankly, disastrous second season. Did you see it, Sean?
No, the reviews for it were so kind of mixed to poor that... I liked the first season and thought it was interesting, but I also kind of felt like I got what I needed.
Right.
Or what I was interested in from seeing live-action Last of Us from that. I would have been interested if the second season had gotten really good reviews. I would have been curious enough to watch it, but the reviews are so kind of mixed that I did not check it out.
Yeah, I made it 4 episodes in before tapping out. I think they made basically every wrong creative choice you could. They revealed Abby's motivation in the first scene of the season, but then they did not go on to have Abby be a main character. So they just, that like, and like the entire nature of perspective, which is what The Last of Us 2 is all about, is like ripped out of it, but not in an artful way or a way that like makes for an interesting news story. The episode where Joel dies, Joel is barely in because most of that episode is about an added filler battle back at like the camp. And so Joel is an afterthought in his farewell episode. They put all the flashbacks from Last of Us 2 that Joel is in into one episode near the end of the season. So they ripped that out. Probably because they don't want to pay Pedro Pascal for future seasons, I guess. But that also feels like you're not really understanding it. It also moves at such a slow pace. Like, it's going to take them 2 or 3 seasons to get through this one fucking game, which is ridiculous. It's also only a 7-episode season that just ended kind of meh. And like, yeah, nobody seemed to be satisfied with it, like whether you were coming from the game or just from the show. And like, it does make me wonder how much that is like, was the limiting factor on it this season's really weird, strained relationship with the source material? Was that a Druckmann problem or a Craig Mazin problem? In either direction, like, I have to think there was something going on in the show also that made Neil Druckmann want to do this, not just whatever pressures are happening at Naughty Dog. But we'll probably never know. We'll see what happens over at Naughty Dog, which, has been an interesting studio for a while. I mean, their last game was Last of Us 2, which had a notoriously awful, like, development period that really kind of hurt the studio. And we'll see how Intergalactic turns out. But they have not, for the PS5 generation, they have not been the like lead developer that they were in the PS4 generation. So we'll see.
Yeah, like I do think that also just like with the show, in a world where you're getting 7 to 8 episodes or whatever for a season, like that's not enough episodes to make an adaptation of Last of Us 2. But also, it doesn't actually make sense to split The Last of Us 2 into 2 seasons. You know, like maybe you could try to do that if you made really big creative decisions on how to and make really big changes to that material. But I think like the knee-jerk thing, and I'm guessing this is not necessarily what they did, but maybe kind of half what they did, is that you'd split that the 2 seasons would be, one season would be an Ellie season, one season would be an Abby season. But that also is not a good way. Like you can't split out your perspective shift thing with a year plus off that without having that material out there. So it just seems like it seems like a hard thing to try to figure out how the fuck you adapt that show into, or that game into a show, especially if you're only getting a pretty small episode count.
Yeah, and they said in this announcement, Neil Druckmann said they hadn't started work on season 3 yet, so that season is 2 to 3 years away. And it's like, guys, TV doesn't make sense when you're doing it this way. This is why the Harry Potter show is going to fail, by the way, over at HBO, is that if you're making a season every 2 to 3 years and it involves kids, you're fucked. Last of Us is about adults, but if you're doing a giant cliffhanger, we adapted half the story. In the next season, Ellie will barely be in it, but it's going to come out 2 to 3 years. It's just it's a ridiculous way to make television, and I think everyone is feeling that at this point. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm curious what happens with Naughty Dog, and also I do wonder what this means for how near or far Intergalactic is. Because we've seen one like announcement of it, but yeah, it's unclear to me where that game is in its development cycle.
Yeah, I would guess that's a 2027 game would be my trying to read the tea leaves on that one.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else about that, or move on to our next one, Sean?
Let's move on to the next one, because I know that you've got a lot of thoughts on the next one.
Yeah, we haven't talked about this on the podcast yet, but I've been wanting to. There's been a lot of drama around the James Bond franchise. To recap for people who don't maybe know all the ins and outs, James Bond was a very unusual film franchise in that from its inception in 1962 through to the last Daniel Craig movie, No Time to Die, in 2021, it was produced by one small family, the Broccoli family. It was Albert R. Broccoli during his lifetime. He passed it on near the end of his life to his daughter Barbara Broccoli and his son-in-law Alfred G. Wilson. And so those 3 have been the producers on all James Bond, all 25 of them over 60 years. And then near the end of that whole cycle, James Bond passed through different distributors and whatnot through that whole phase. But at the end, it was owned or distributed by MGM. And so when Amazon bought MGM Studios They then had the rights to distribute James Bond, but the rights for Bond itself were still with Eon Productions, which is the Broccoli family company. And so when that happened, real-life Dr. Evil Jeff Bezos, it is amazing how much Jeff Bezos just is a James Bond villain in like all aspects of his life. Anyway, Jeff Bezos wanted to really, really fucking milk James Bond. This really pissed off Barbara Broccoli in particular, who was still like the main active producer on the series. Like, there were stories about meetings where they were like being pitched like, we're going to do a Money Penny spin-off TV show. And she was like, no, you're not. No, you're fucking not. And apparently her last straw was when someone at Amazon Studios said, look, we need to make more James Bond content. And she got so mad at the word content that she stormed out and called Jeff Bezos a fucking idiot. And Jeff Bezos then got on the phone and said, I don't care what price it is, buy those like motherfuckers out. And everybody does have their price. Understandably, the Broccolis even had their price, and it was a multi-billion-dollar deal where Amazon now has the full rights for James Bond, and Eon Productions will no longer be part of it, which to me means the James Bond series that we've known is over. Like, James Bond was 62 to 2021. That is, whatever comes next will be a different thing, because James Bond was love it or hate it, and God knows it had its highs and lows, but it was what it was, and it was an Eon Productions thing. It will no longer be that. So Amazon is moving forward with trying to produce the next James Bond movie. And the first announcement that they are serious about this happened this last week when they have tapped Denis Villeneuve, the director of the Dune movies, as well as Blade Runner 2047, Arrival, lots of films that people like. He will be the director, they're saying, of the next James Bond movie. Rumors published by Variety indicate that actors that Amazon wants for the role include Tom Holland, Jacob Elordi, and Harris Dickinson. Sean, stop me from killing myself. Stop me. No.
Like, it's that where you almost feel like Amazon is just like aware of memes when they say Tom Holland, and they put Tom Holland's name on that list. It's like you guys, you're part of the internet.
Yeah, I don't know. So look, here's the thing. This is years off. Denis Villeneuve right now is in the midst of, they're about to shoot the third Dune movie, which is the last one he's planning on. It'll be Dune Messiah, which is sort of the end of the Paul Atreides story, so it makes sense as the end of like a film trilogy about Dune. So that's what he's working on. So he won't even be able to like seriously start work on this for like 2 years, and anything could happen in that time. I don't believe Denis Villeneuve would cast Tom Holland as his James Bond, because I think Denis Villeneuve has better taste than that. So, you know, if Amazon is insistent that they have, you know, some it boy play James Bond, I think Denis Villeneuve will be happy to walk. We'll see. I don't think Denis Villeneuve makes total sense as a James Bond director to begin with, other than the fact that he is a good director. But there are plenty of good directors who I don't think are James Bond directors, and I don't know. Villeneuve has never made a movie with humor in it, and I feel like that's a pretty key part of James Bond. So we'll see. I don't know. Mostly, like, I'm just upset that Amazon owns this thing now. I'm sad about that. I think it is like just another sign of like how much our culture is being eaten up by these monopolies, because like, yes, Eon Productions made a lot of mistakes. They could be very reactive in their trends, but they were also very good at certain things. They were very, very focused on making James Bond movies event movies. Other than like some periods, James Bond generally had really high production values. They were good-looking movies. They had great music. You know, they were movies. They weren't content. They did not treat James Bond as content. They treated it as one at a time. We're making films. And good or bad, that's what they did. And I respect that to a certain extent. It was not the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was not like we're doing James Bond and in between each movie we're going to have 5 TV spin-offs explaining how Moneypenny got her name or whatever they would do, you know? And like, that's not what Amazon's going to do with James Bond. I can just tell you right now, and that bums me out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is, you know, and I'm not even like a huge James Bond guy. You know, I've seen most of the Sean Connery movies. I saw Casino Royale and Skyfall for the Craig ones, and I've seen like a couple here and there in like the Pierce Brosnan era. But I'm not like a hardcore James Bond dude, but I think you just always have that sense that like those movies were made with integrity, like that with that kind of more old school Hollywood kind of idea behind it, and that has been maintained there for so long. And yeah, like this is that, like we were talking about the Xbox news, this sort of the modern era of the techno-fascist, and that's what this is. Like it's all like this sense of we're hoovering up as many IPs as we can get to get that content out there. It's exactly what Amazon did with the Lord of the Rings brand to make their show that I'm sure everybody's seen and loves. That's must be just the biggest hit TV show of all time. Which I don't even remember. Lord of the Rings. I don't even remember what the fucking name of the show is.
The Rings of Power.
The Rings of Power. Yes, that's not a weird spin-off book made in concert with the movies that show you the behind the scenes of the movies. No, that is their new TV show that they spent ungodly quantities of money to make. And it just feels like James Bond is the next IP to be like thrown into that fucking burning fire at Amazon as they're trying to find a way to get people to watch stuff on their service because they must own everything in the world. It's not good enough to like dominate the entire retail market space on the internet. You must also then make movies and TV shows and video game platforms and stream shit and all that kind of stuff. They have to do all of it and own all the IPs and all this kind of shit. And it's just really depressing to see James Bond be yet another thing that is being sacrificed at that altar. I'm with you that like I don't necessarily think that these names being thrown around of actors to play James Bond, I don't think that indicates anything of who is actually going to play James Bond. I'm not even convinced that Villeneuve will ever actually end up directing this movie. It feels like it very well he could. It also very well could just be a thing of where they want to have a name to trot out there at this point to get people excited at the idea of James Bond stuff. And so who's like one of the hottest directors around right now in Hollywood that makes big movies that people like the Dune movies? Well, here he is, Denis Villeneuve. Will he actually end up directing it? Who knows?
My strong suspicion is that Villeneuve is probably a James Bond fan who would like to make a James Bond movie. And I think he's probably thinking, hey, there is no downside for me to engage right now. And if I feel like I will be allowed to make a real movie, I can do it. And if I get the sense that I will not be, they need me way more than I need them. I can walk away at any point. Like, I'm guessing that is his thought process, and that is not a dumb thought process. But yeah, we shall see. The other thing that is like so ridiculous about all this is that Eon was really successful at this. Like I was the other night, I was kind of bored and I started looking at the historical box office for James Bond. There has never been a James Bond movie that lost money. Not only that, there has never been a James Bond movie that didn't make like a significant multiplier of its budget. Like if you look at the Sean Connery era was the most successful. Like if you adjust those movies for inflation, those are movies that made like Titanic amounts of money. They like the movie Titanic. They made like Thunderball was like, if you adjust that for inflation, was like $1.6 billion. Just like unbelievable sums. But even if you get into the Roger Moore era, like just again, they would keep the budgets pretty like low for the in contrast to the grosses pretty low, and then they would make these huge sums of money. Went down a little bit in like the Timothy Dalton era, but then came roaring back for Pierce Brosnan. And then like for the most recent era, those 5 Daniel Craig movies all made bank. They made huge sums. Skyfall made over $1 billion. Spectre and No Time to Die both made close to $1 billion. They've obviously been huge on home video and streaming and all of that stuff. Like those are like Eon has never lost the ability to make studios lots and lots of money. So the idea that like Jeff Bezos comes in and is like, I know better than this family that has been doing it for 60 years how to make money on James Bond, to the point that I'm going to just pay them billions of dollars that I may or may not ever see again so I can do it myself. Like, it's insane. It's insane, these fucking tech bros who come in and think they know better than Hollywood. Like, I'm sorry, producing is a real job. Like, it takes real talent. Like, those, the Daniel Craig era had some qualitative ups and downs, but it also had 3 highly acclaimed movies, Craig's first, third, and fifth ones. His last 3 all won Academy Awards for, like, songs. Like, Eon consistently was able to make these movies cultural events, conversations, like, big money makers, and Amazon has never, ever produced anything that you could describe with any of those words. Their Lord of the Rings shows are fucking bombs by all data we have. Like, they have never put out a movie that was huge. They've never had a streaming show that was huge. Like, it's ridiculous to think these people are going to do better than the people who had 60 fucking years of experience. Like, that's what pisses me off more than anything else. Even if I didn't care about James Bond, it's the hubris. Like, fuck you. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's like, it's just Amazon. It's like, I just don't understand why they're a fucking streaming video company at a certain point. Like, it's just
they
like,
don't
you take
understand
it for granted.
Yeah.
You take it for granted because it is what it is, and they're like the biggest company in the world. But it's just like, you don't have to do everything. And it's like, I'm just thinking of this because both. There was fucking Mobile Suit Gundam G-Quox was the Amazon Prime thing. And when I realized that, I'm like, well, I have to pirate that show because I just can't deal with trying to stream something on Amazon Prime. And then just the other day, I realized that the new Kyoto Animation show, City the Animation, I had assumed that was going to be on Crunchyroll. And I was like looking at it to put it on my watch list on Crunchyroll because the new episode is literally today as we're recording this came out. I haven't seen it yet, or the first episode is just came out. But then I was like, oh shit, it's actually streaming on Amazon Prime. Well, I guess I'll just have to go pirate that somewhere as well because I just can't deal with it. Like, it's awful. It's not just that I don't even want to deal with it. It's like, it barely works when I try to stream it on my fucking PlayStation, which is the main way I watch stuff on my main TV. It's like, it's just like the worst service. It's like a service where you go, where like content goes to die. That even if I was interested in something, and every once in a while there's something I'm interested in, like, you know, it's hard to get me more interested in a new Gundam show and the next thing from Kyoto Animation that's a spiritual follow-up to Nichijou, my favorite comedy ever. Even then I'm like, I just can't, I'm sorry, like, fuck you, I just can't deal with your terrible service. It's so ridiculous that these people like Jeff Bezos just think that they get to own the world and everything they do will be successful because they have a lot of money. And it's like, that's just not how anything works. But unfortunately they don't, you know, it's where I wish that I was a religious person so I could believe that there was a hell that he would suffer in, because it's like, if there are people that deserve it, it's people like him.
Indeed. All right. Final note today, rumors indicate that... I can't even get through these, Sean. This sucks. Rumors indicate that Disney is intending to reboot the Indiana Jones movie franchise, which is the dumbest sentence I've ever fucking read.
Yep.
I said this on Twitter. I don't know if people fully understand what I meant by this, so let me explain it here. Indiana Jones is not a franchise. It just isn't.
I agree.
A franchise is like Marvel or Star Wars, something where you can get other producers and directors and stars and characters and like parts of the lore and expand it. Like Star Wars, if you're doing it right, is like infinitely renewable because it's a big, you know, thing that you can do forever. Or like Gundam, you know, use something we love from Japan. Gundam is a franchise. Indiana Jones is a set of movies that is linked less by any plot details or lore or universe or anything like that than it is the presence of Harrison Ford, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg. The one movie that didn't have all three of them is the one that bombed, and that's Dial of Destiny, which had Harrison Ford, but not the other two. And I'm sorry, that's not an accident. Indiana Jones is about the intersection of those three people. Not all of them work, but they all did get like money, attention, and all of them have their individual fans because that's what it was. It was a set of movies where those three did something together, and the four that they made, none of them are very similar to each other. Like, they're all pretty different movies because it was less about, like, we need to continue the story of Indiana Jones than it was we want to make another movie together, and that's what those four movies are. And you can't reboot Indiana Jones. You can't, like... Did they not see Solo? Did they not understand this with the Han Solo thing? That, like, just recasting here... And I think Alden Ehrenreich is very good in that Solo movie. Yeah. But, like, you cannot just recast Harrison Ford and have his character continue, because the reason people went to see Indiana Jones wasn't because of Indiana Jones. It was because of Harrison fucking Ford. The reason people liked Han Solo in Empire Strikes Back was Harrison Ford. If they had had him come out of the carbonite and be played by Richard Gere, I'm sorry, people wouldn't have... And I like Richard Gere. The point is, it wouldn't have worked. It was because of Harrison Ford. Like... This isn't rocket science, guys. Just because it has a name that people know doesn't mean it will do well. You can't reboot Indiana Jones. I feel like I'm in crazy town.
I'm glad you're having this reaction, because this is the exact reaction I had when I saw the news where it just says we're going to reboot the Indiana Jones movie franchise, was like the headline I saw. I'm like, what does that sentence even fucking mean? Like, there's nothing to be rebooted, and there is no franchise. Like, it's just a series of movies. Like, it's just so weird that, you know, you have to sort of like mine for IP everywhere, to the extent that you're like, well, then who do we cast as the new Indiana Jones? It just feels like, you know, all the fucking like, you know, fucking, you know, piranha out there in the media, like, news sphere, just jump on that story immediately. Unfortunately, I didn't see a single one that was saying, and the answer's right there in front of us. You just get Alden Ehrenreich again. Like,
yes.
It's like, they already cast him. I don't know. Who fucking cares? Like, just, it doesn't matter. It does not matter who you cast as another Indiana Jones in the movies. It's like, as you said, like, it's Harrison Ford. If there's almost no other movie star I can think of, at least in like the modern era, who's still alive, that is like Harrison Ford, you know, that has that kind of, just that level of raw charisma, that you will watch the movie just to see his fucking performance, you know, and just to see him, just a glimpse of Harrison Ford is enough to make you happy. There's just something about the guy. You know, he's like an old school style movie star.
He's like a Humphrey Bogart or something, where you can just
Exactly.
like, you're making Humphrey Bogart. No one remembers the name of the characters Humphrey Bogart plays. He's Humphrey Bogart. Like, he's Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca. He's Humphrey Bogart in The Big Sleep. That's what he is, and that's Harrison Ford. You know?
Yeah, and it's just like, he's just fucking built different, and it's just the way it is, and you just have to respect it, and there's just no point in quote unquote rebooting the Indiana Jones movie. It's just such a funny notion, because it's also like, it implies some sort of like ongoing narrative and continuity that matters in the world of Indiana Jones, as if that was a thing that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas gave a single fucking thought about making those movies. You know, like, it feels like it's like an incredibly like minor footnote on the movie Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom that is technically a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, that it technically happens before, because it doesn't fucking matter. Like, it doesn't matter. You could watch those movies in whatever order, at least the original three. Obviously, it gets weird once you move to Crystal Skull because of how much time has passed. But of the original trilogy, like, who fucking cares? Like, it doesn't matter. There's no ongoing narrative. There's no continuity. There's like, it's the most basic plots and most basic character arcs to be there to buoy up like the like aesthetic, the vibe, and the action and all of that. Like, it's just not about the things that a thing needs to be about if you want to quote unquote reboot it. And just the notion is so silly. Like, do you do the plot of fucking Raiders of the Lost Ark again? Is that what you mean by rebooting Indiana Jones? Like, or do you go to the like the deep lore of the Young Indiana Jones TV show and like start from there? Like, what is it?
Clearly, what I can tell you what
idea.
it'll be a movie where he doesn't get the whip in the hat until the last 5 minutes. It'll be something like that, right? Where it's like becoming Indiana Jones.
Yes, it will end with like the first 5 minutes of The Last Crusade, and that will be, except for you'll be an adult this time, obviously, but that's what it will be.
And here's the other thing, you know, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas created the franchise blockbuster model that everyone plays with now. But here's the thing they did. George Lucas, his initial idea for a sci-fi movie is he wanted to do something with Flash Gordon, and he couldn't get the rights. So he's like, oh, you know what? I can make my own thing. And he made Star Wars. And it was amazing. In part because he wasn't playing in anyone else's sandbox. Yeah. Indiana Jones, in part, comes out of Steven Spielberg's wish to do James Bond, but he couldn't. And George Lucas had this idea for this, like, archaeologist dude. He's like, that could be my James Bond. And he made his own thing. And now, instead of Disney asking themselves, what could we do that could have a similar impact as Indiana Jones, No, it's just we'll make Indiana Jones again. And this is why Hollywood is dying. Like, this is like such an obvious like statement of why Hollywood is dying is instead of anyone going, what could our Star Wars be or what could our Indiana Jones be? It's, well, let's just spend the money and buy those things and make them again. And we're fucked. We're all fucked. We're fucked.
Anyways, they should cast Tom Holland as Indiana Jones. Just to complete the circle. I want the same person to play live action Nathan Drake and Indiana Jones, and James Bond. Just cast Tom Holland and everything, and just call it a day.
You know, his taste in movies is bad enough that he would do it. All right, Sean, let's get into the stuff. We have all sorts of stuff to get into, and you know, I'm short circuiting because of my frustration with the last few news items. So I'm going to let you pick a stuff thing first.
Yes. Well, I feel like I should go first because I've got a good transition out of that because I have not only were we talking about Indiana Jones movies, but I have played the Indiana Jones, the video game, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. That's also, you know, connected to Xbox. Machine Games is still, you know, there, which I'm happy about because that's the reason I played this game is because Machine Games made it. So for people who, you know, don't remember or don't know, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, this came out last year on Xbox. It came out earlier this year on PlayStation. Which is obviously how I played it. And it is by Machine Games, which are the people who made the modern Wolfenstein games, which is why I was interested in playing this game is because I really love Wolfenstein The New Order and Wolfenstein The New Colossus. Those are two like really awesome, very interesting, unique, modern, relatively modern first-person shooters. They're old games now. Like it's weird. It's been a weirdly long time since The New Colossus, obviously because they've been working on this. And Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, it's an interesting game. I have very kind of like mixed feelings on it, that there's stuff about it that I think is amazing. And there's also stuff about it that I think is very frustrating, but I also think it's just a very interesting game in some ways similarly to those Wolfenstein games where it is designed and built unlike any kind of other big budget modern game you could play. And particularly in this world where it feels like we get very few games that are big budget and single player focused. It is very refreshing to play something like this that has a real creative spark in terms of how it's designed, even if that spark does not always land. So one other piece of context for my reaction to this game that I do think is important is that I'm not like a diehard Indiana Jones fan. Again, the reason I played this was not because I love Indiana Jones, it's because I love those Machine Games games. I like the Indiana Jones movies. I like Raiders and Temple of Doom, and particularly The Last Crusade is my favorite one of the three, mostly just because I like all the Sean Connery stuff with Harrison Ford. I think it's just very entertaining. But I'm not like super hardcore. They're not my favorite movies. It's not really my favorite genre. And so, you know, I have affection for Indiana Jones, but I don't have like an undying love for Indiana Jones. In the way that I have for like Star Wars or something, I will play a Star Wars game because it's Star Wars. I'm not going to go out of my way for an Indiana Jones game unless it's made by people that I'm very interested by, like Machine Games. So that probably colors my reaction. I think if you are a super hardcore Indiana Jones person, there's probably stuff about this game that's going to grab you in ways that it's not going to grab me. Where to start with the game? So I guess where to start like with the kind of like the story and the performances. Obviously, we're talking about like having, you know, Harrison Ford. What do you do with Indiana Jones if there's no Harrison Ford? So they cast Troy Baker as Indiana Jones here, and I think he does a very good job of evoking the voice and the mannerisms of Harrison Ford's performance from the old Indiana Jones movies. Not the old Indiana Jones movies where he's an old man, but the old ones that are old in our life where it was made a long time ago. And it evokes that like performance very well, but I think he also does a very good job of never getting caught up in just doing a Harrison Ford impression. And I think that that's like a really tight rope to walk. Like, I think it's like a really hard thing that he has to do as an actor in this game. But it's very different than if you played any of the old Indiana Jones games that were like the old school adventure games and stuff, where you'd sometimes have like a guy doing Indiana Jones, but he's just trying to sound as close to Harrison Ford as that guy can. Or like old Star Wars games would have like Luke Skywalker in it, but it's just someone trying to sound like Mark Hamill from the old movies. It's not someone doing like a real performance as the character. And I think that Troy Baker does a very good job of feeling like he's Indiana Jones without ever just sort of like squashing his performance into being a straightforward Harrison Ford impersonation. And so I was pretty sold on that kind of take on the character very quickly. It helps that the modeling is so fucking good. Like, he looks like Indiana Jones. The animation is so good on him. Like, the physical mannerisms of the character are really well done. The writing for the character is very sharp. And I think they get the tone, they get the humor of Indiana Jones extremely well. It's got that kind of goofy Spielberg and Lucas-y kind of quality to a lot of it. And I think they nail that vibe to it really, really well. And so that aspect of it's incredibly well done. In terms of the plot is very simple. It is, they are not trying to reinvent the wheel. It is like the plot of all of these stories of there's a big mystery that is the Great Circle, where an artifact is stolen from Indy's like museum / college he works in, and he has to go investigate why it was taken, and that brings him to the Vatican. Where he learns that there are all these other artifacts around the world that a Nazi rival archaeologist is also taking, and they have something to do with this Great Circle. That is like, if you draw a circle around the globe, there's like all these points that intersect with that circle have these ancient temples there, and these artifacts are found in those ancient temples, and there's a kind of supernatural secret underpinning all of that the Nazis want to use for their war machine. It's basically the plot of Raiders of the Lost Ark, only instead of it being the Ark of the Covenant, it is artifacts at the Great Circle. It even goes, does the thing that all of these stories have to do, that Indiana Jones gets kind of ahead of them in the treasure hunt chase and goes into the tomb first and gets the artifact, but then that's when the bad guy comes in, because really the bad guy was letting Indiana Jones do all the work so he could go to get him at gunpoint and steal the artifact. Like, it is beat for beat, plot point for plot point, exactly that kind of story. And that got to me a little bit tedious at some point. I think particularly in a kind of post Uncharted 4 world for me, like as somebody who's not like super deep into these treasure hunter stories, it's not kind of like my favorite genre. It never, like, this game never really gets into richer kind of character material. There's not a lot of like thematic stuff. It's got like the general kind of narrative content of those old movies, but it does get, for me, kind of tedious when that is spread across like a roughly 16 to 20 hour video game, depending on how much side content you do. That doesn't sustain that to me in the way that if you play like Uncharted 4, that game, which is probably about the length of this Indiana Jones game, has so much more thematic and like character material, and Nate Drake goes on a real journey in that game. Indiana Jones, he's just not a character that has much in terms of growth. This true of the movies. It's true of this game. Like, he has an arc. Like, there's a co-star character, Gina, who's this kind of like love interest in this game, and she's really cool. And there is an arc with him in the relationship with that character, but it's not the kind of really dramatic character arc that I personally would want in a story that is the length of the story of this game.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, part of it is just, it's the problem if Indiana Jones isn't their character. They didn't create him. They don't get to decide his ending, because there are 5 movies, and this fits in roughly with the first 3, because it's during World War II, where there's Nazis, right? So, like, they can't do what, like, Uncharted 4 does with Nathan Drake, where they decide to have him, stop being an adventurer at the end or something, right? Like, they have to just keep the kind of machine going. And this is also something I'm going to be curious about in the IO Interactive James Bond game, because that'll have a similar challenge that, although maybe more open there, because James Bond obviously gets to reinvent himself with each version of the character, but generally speaking, a James Bond adventure is very well suited for a 2 to 2.5 hour movie, but has never been done at the length of this is more like the length of a TV show. And so I'm curious how they'll tackle that problem too. Just to be clear, I have not played this Indiana Jones game yet. I'm very excited to. I really want to. I've been doing a bunch of Nintendo stuff, so I have not touched my PlayStation in a while. But once this goes on a significant enough sale, I will be playing it.
Yeah, so Jonathan, I don't think you would have the same problem with the narrative that I had, just because you like Indiana Jones a lot more than me. So I think that anyone who's a big fan of Indiana Jones, that will sustain you. But if you're like me, who's like likes them but isn't necessarily like here just for the Indiana Jonesiness of it, it does feel like I wish I had a little bit stronger of a motivation to kind of continue with that main storyline that the game is lacking. So again, I think it's kind of, your mileage may vary on your enjoyment of the narrative. But again, like things like the quality of the dialogue in terms of how it's written, the quality of how well it's performed, like the quality of the direction of the cutscenes, all that stuff is top notch. As you would expect, like if you've played those Wolfenstein games, you know that this team is really good at that aspect of these kinds of games. And that's very true here. Again, it is, I think, kind of what you said. It is limited in what it can do or how far it can go because it's using this other character. So it kind of depends on how you feel about that in terms of how much you'll enjoy the story.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's something I'm fascinated to see. And, we were talking about with the movies that you can't just reboot it. Obviously, with a video game, the difference is that it's effectively an animated thing, and so there's just a lot more freedom you can have to do this kind of thing. Like the, digitally de-aged Harrison Ford in Dial of Destiny looked terrible, but they were trying to place it in live-action environments. When it's all CGI, and you have someone as talented as Troy Baker able to, do what he's doing with his voice and physical performance, you can sell this. The future of... If Indiana Jones has a future, this makes more sense to me than another movie.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I never felt distracted by the idea of the digital Indiana Jones or any of that kind of stuff, or the performance, like all of that worked for me really well. In terms of the game design, this is where I've got some things I love about it and some things that I really don't. In terms of the structure of the game, it's very unique. Like, it is not designed quite like any other game I've played. It is a first-person game, though there are, when you're climbing up a ladder and stuff like that, they'll move to third person, but you're playing 95% of the game is in third person, so you're looking at the world through Indy's eyes. And Machine Games brings to this the thing that this team has brought to basically all of their games, going all the way back to when this was Starbreeze, and they made games like Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay, or The Darkness, a really good early Xbox 360 first-person shooter. They're really, really good at kind of physicalizing your character, making your character feel very tangible and like they exist in the game world. And with Indiana Jones, that is even more so than usual because it is much more of a brawler than it is a first-person shooter. So you do have guns, and there is gunplay, and it is satisfying when you're in a situation where you would use a gun, but the vast majority of the combat in the game, of which there's not even all that much, is really you going in and punching Nazis or Italian fascists in the face, or you're using your whip on them and stuff like that. It's vaguely reminiscent of if you've played Condemned Criminal Origins, that first-person horror game, early 360. I really liked that, and that's another game that is a first-person shooter, but it's basically you're picking up lead pipes and hitting people in the face. That's basically Indiana Jones, only not just lead pipes. You're picking up anything. It feels like the team had a very fun time of coming up with what are all the objects you can model in the environment that Indiana Jones can pick up and hit a Nazi in the face with. So you've got acoustic guitars, you've got frying pans, you've got my favorite one is in the Egypt map. They've got these big poles they're using for their laundry, and so you can pick up this big wooden pole with a Nazi's fucking cartoon underwear with big red hearts on it at the end. There's a lot of really great kind of slapstick comedy there that again is part of the Indiana Jones movies. Those movies have lots of great kind of physical slapstick humor and comedy in the action. And they do a good job of realizing that with the way that first-person brawling is designed. And then obviously there's also this kind of pseudo-Hitman-esque stealth where in each of the regions in the game you have a couple of different outfits you can find. And so you've got some simple stealth mechanics, though a lot of it revolves around before you tackle any of the larger kind of camps of enemies, you really should find the enemy uniform disguise that lets you get through those much easier. But like Hitman, there are enemies that are the captains or whatever that can see through your disguise if you're standing in one place for too long. So it's got a very simplified version of that Hitman stealth, and that stuff works quite well. And I think just the feel of the game is really fun. They've got that ridiculous, great Indiana Jones punch sound effect that makes it feel like when you're smacking a Nazi in the face, they're getting hit with a truck. It's ridiculous, especially because it's a video game and you're just wailing on the triggers and just throwing out all these punches, just wham, 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 and you just see these guys get knocked over. That stuff is hugely satisfying. The gameplay feel of the combat, I think, is really good. And so when you're doing that stuff, it is a really good time. Where I end up feeling a little bit more mixed on it is kind of the broader design of the game has things about it that works and things that don't. By broader design, I mean kind of the structure and pacing of it. So the design of the game is kind of revolves around 3 large areas you go to. There's the Vatican, then you go to Giza in Egypt, and then you go to a kind of like marshy rainforest in Siam. So you kind of get 3 different flavors of Indiana Jones. You get kind of like this more kind of like city sort of area with the Vatican. You get your, large desert area like in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but you also get your like ancient kind of jungle rainforest with ruins kind of thing like the beginning of Raiders. And so you get those kind of 3 main areas, and they are big hub areas that you kind of go around and explore, and they have the different spokes that go off. That will have different like tombs and things like that you're going into to find clues and complete missions. But there's also lots of optional content and side things and collectibles and stuff to find. And then there are a couple of kind of more linear areas that connect to those, that when you finish like Giza, there's a really cool series of kind of smaller linear spaces you go through in different areas around the world that are much more kind of action focused. Because overall the game is... like the one part of Indiana Jones it doesn't do a lot of is it doesn't do a lot of the big action set pieces. It's got a couple of those and they are nice. But it's not like Uncharted, where it feels like in Uncharted that is like the spine of the game. It's like a game designed to deliver unto the player these playable versions of these huge action set pieces and spectacles. Indiana Jones has a couple of those, but they're also not as interactive as those equivalent sequences in Uncharted game, partially because I think it's a lot harder to do that in first person. And it's just not the focus of the game. So you do get a couple of them in those more linear areas, but the game is much more about you exploring these kind of hub areas, getting quests that bring you down into these like kind of more linear tomb sections that have puzzles. And you're doing your light stealth and combat stuff, and you're kind of piecing together the story and doing your kind of Indiana Jones shit and that kind of more archaeology investigating. And it's much more on that side of thing is where the emphasis in the game design is. And I think when you're in those kinds of more focused sections within those hubs, it's really fun. Like once you're like in the tomb and you're going through and you've got your fucking torch and you're lighting it up with your lighter and you're putting together the different clues, like that stuff's really good. Where I'm not as big a fan of the game design is in that kind of like the side stuff and the optional collectibles and that kind of end of the exploration, I tended to find very frustrating. And I had a weird cycle with the game where I would be playing it and I'd be so into it because I was like doing the kind of mainline stuff or one of the kind of main side quests that have like lots of cutscenes and like lots of story to it. And I would be playing that and be like, God, this game is fucking awesome. I don't want to put this game down yet. I want to play more, but I also don't want to move on to the next area and learn the next big story thing. So let me do some side stuff. And I'd start doing the side stuff, and I'd slowly get kind of bored and frustrated with doing the side stuff and be like, this game kind of sucks. And I'd put it down, and then the next day I'd start playing it, be like, fuck this side stuff. Let me do the main stuff. And I'd do the main stuff, I'd be way into it. And I'd be, this is so good. I should do some of that side stuff. I'm sure it wasn't as... I was just tired last time, and I got like annoyed with it. And then I would do the side stuff and get annoyed again. And so like I had that kind of cycle with it, where I definitely think if you're someone who has an instinct like I do, where I want to kind of 100% games or explore as much of it as I can, this game can be frustrating because I think some of that side stuff is not particularly well done. And some of the reasons, like some of my issues with it, a lot of it boils down to a problem that I have where it kind of filters into one reward type for everything that you're doing. And that is this like artifact that is like, to put it humorously, it looks like an ancient stone sex toy. It is like a rocky cylinder with a curve at the bottom, and it just kind of looks like a very smooth stone dick. And that's like, I don't know how else to put it. Like, I'm not the only one to make this observation online. When I was curious, sort of like, is it just me or is this like a stone dildo? And everyone's like, yeah, they kind of look like stone dildos. And you're finding them fucking everywhere because it's like the one thing the game has to reward you with. So it's like whether you're in the Vatican and you're like in like one of the catacombs under the Vatican and you found a path off to the side where instead of going left and that's the main way, you went right and there's like a little extra like area you can like crawl under and find. What is there to find in there? Oh, well, it's a stone dick. Or maybe you're in Giza in Egypt and you're in one of the pyramids and there's like a mirror puzzle that, because it's a video game and there's a mirror puzzle where you're reflecting light off of mirrors and you're like, well, if I do it this way, that's the main path. Oh, but if I do that, it opens the side door. What's behind the side door? Oh, it's a stone dick. Or you're in Siam and there's these like gear puzzles on the wall and you're like, oh, I collect the gears and I can do this like puzzle where you do all the gears. Or there's like this is such a video game-ass, like old school, like adventure game video game. There's even like a pipe dream style puzzle where you get different sections of pipes and you have to direct the water in different ways. Like if you played video games for a long time, it's like a who's who of like classic video game puzzles. But the thing is, unless it's unlocking something on the main path, the thing it's getting you 95% of the time is little stone dick. And it's like, there's like 100 something of these in the game. You're collecting them constantly. There are even puzzles that are like, here's a random wall with a bunch of holes in it. And what you do is you have to take the stone dicks you've collected and put them in the holes. If you fill up all the holes on the wall, then it gives you another stone dick, and you take all the stone dicks you put in there and you keep them, because at the end of the game, in the last area, there is a giant wall with the exact number of holes of all the stone dicks in the game, and you put all the stone dicks and all the holes on the wall, and it unlocks the secret ending that is like a minute-long cutscene that takes place after the ending of the game, that I would recommend just watching on YouTube, because it's not worth it to go around to travel the entire world looking for stone dicks to put in this wall. And there's just this like issue of, it's a really unsatisfying thing to be collecting. It doesn't feed into player like growth. There's not a lot of upgrades you get. There's a couple, like you get these like adventure books that unlock upgrades, but most of the upgrades are not particularly helpful because the game is so light on combat and the combat's so simple that most of the upgrades that are really useful to the player are just, I get more health or I get another bar of stamina. It's not really helpful for you to like, oh, if I whip the guy around the legs, like it stuns them longer or whatever. Those combat upgrades aren't very useful. And so the only thing you get from getting the stone dicks is experience. And the only thing you spend experience on are these books that that get you upgrades that don't help you a whole lot. And so that like cycle, it reminded me a lot of when I got kind of very fed up with playing Breath of the Wild personally, where I just got really annoyed when I played Breath of the Wild that everything you did ultimately got you a shrine orb. And it didn't matter what it was. It always kind of just boiled down to you got a shrine orb. And at a certain point, I've got all the health and stamina I need. I don't need more shrine orbs. And so it becomes this tedious thing of if you're going back and trying to collect everything, you're getting stuff that's not very useful. And the other thing is that there's this problem with like the way the game it displays where the collectibles are, that you get these maps that show you like here they are in like the Giza area, and I got the map for the Giza area and I can see them all. But it is oftentimes like really hard to tell, okay, I know this thing is in this spot on the map, but because there's so many areas in the game that are part of big long underground tombs, if you missed one of them while you were exploring a main mission, it's such a pain in the ass to go back and like I have to go through the whole tomb and swing on with my whip and go through all this shit just to get one stone dick, and it's gonna take me like 5 minutes to get the stupid fucking thing. And so it was this thing of where I wanted really good side content because the game is fun. It has really big, cool open areas. Like all the three of those main areas are cool to explore as big spaces. And they're all designed in different ways, and they have their very kind of a unique kind of style to them. But it just became so tedious to go back and actually do the side content. And that's, I think, like the number one thing that if they make a sequel, which who knows if Xbox will be making video games by the time a sequel would come out, that's like the main area that they could improve, is like finding a way to have the side content be more rich and really kind of flesh out that world. Because everything else about the design I think is cool. And I think the idea of having these 3 big hub areas is the right way to go. Because there are other things about the way the missions are designed that make the hub areas like really rich feeling. But it's just like that level of the side content, those extra objectives, those extra things to find are fairly tedious, fairly frustrating, and just don't give you much as the player to do. At the bare minimum, the least they could do is do the Uncharted thing and have them all be unique models that have like a little blurb of text that like, oh, well, this is, an ancient funereal mask from the 13th dynasty or whatever, right? And have Troy Baker give you a little narration. I would appreciate that, but like at a certain point, no matter where you are in the world, all you're finding are stone dicks. There's a reason why the stone dicks are in all these different places. Like, there's a narrative justification for why it's the exact same thing everywhere. But that doesn't make it a fun thing to collect. So that's my overall impressions. Like, it's a game that I enjoyed quite a bit on that main path. And I think if you're someone that is not tempted to do that side stuff, I think if you just kind of generally mainline the game and only do that side content that kind of floats up to the top and is clearly the more interesting, better, like more fleshed out stuff, but leave that smaller level side stuff by the wayside, I think you'll have a great time with the game. And especially if you're a big Indiana Jones fan, like I think this, if you're someone who's really, really into Indiana Jones, I think this game just nails the sensibility, the aesthetic, the vibe, the humor, all of that of those movies, like as well as any video game possibly could. Like it is a really, really well realized version of that whole thing that those movies are doing, in the way that like it's like the Batman Arkham Asylum of Indiana Jones games. Like it just is so good at making you feel like the character and putting you in that world. So I definitely would recommend it to people that sounds like something you'd want.
That's awesome. And it sounds like Batman Arkham Asylum, maybe room to improve in a sequel, and that would be cool to see. So, yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to play this at some point when I can pull myself away from my Switch 2, or it just comes to Switch 2. That's also entirely possible. So we'll see about that. But, yeah, I've been playing the hell out of the Nintendo Switch 2 while we're on video games. Why don't I stick with that? When we last talked about this, Sean, I'd had the Switch 2 for a couple of days. Now I've had it for a full month. So I've had much more time with it. I honestly, like, if you have any questions to help guide this as someone who, like, does not have a Switch 2 but is interested in it, I'm happy to answer things. One thing I'll give as a hardware update right off the bat is that I did wind up picking up the Switch 2 Pro controller. I had a credit somewhere, and then when I added in a trade-in for my Pro Controller 1, I got it for like $30, so it was like a good deal. And this is something I'm very enthusiastic about. The Switch 2 Pro controller might be my favorite first-party controller I've ever used. It is an incredible controller. So it does cost $85, which is a little bit more than like a DualSense or an Xbox controller. Although remember, Xbox controllers don't have batteries in them. So you have to, they're the most expensive if you want a rechargeable battery as an Xbox controller. This does, though, have back buttons, which is not something the standard DualSense or Xbox controllers have. And one thing right off the bat, the back button implementation on the Switch 2 Pro controller puts everybody else doing back buttons to such shame. Everyone else needs to, like, figure out how to do it this well. Because the way the back buttons work on the Switch 2 is that when you are in a game and you open the home menu, which is just holding down the home button and it comes up, and on the Switch 2, that menu is like very minimal compared to like the PlayStation, which is like that long list of options at the bottom, or the Xbox, which is like 7 different tabs. This is just, it's got a power option and like Wi-Fi. And this, it adds, the back buttons are called GL and GR, and they're right there. And all you have to do is either select their icon or just hit the GL or GR, then hit whatever button you want to map to it, and it's done. And it saves it on a per title basis.
Oh, that's
so
good.
if you have, so it is super fast. You don't have to ever go into a separate app. You don't have to remap based on the game. It just remembers all of that. You don't have to deal with any profiles or apps or any of this stuff, which was like always, like I liked the Xbox Elite controller, but I never used the back paddles as much as I wanted to because it was such a pain to like go into the app and then like remap everything and then like save that for a profile. And you had to kind of think of it like, well, I hope this profile will work for multiple games, because if there's a new game that comes and I want to like remap it, I'm gonna have to go through all this again. And with Switch, you don't have to worry about any of that. It just remembers it, and that's awesome. So like in Breath of the Wild, very useful to have that for run and jump, because those are B and X in that game. And if you want to do like a running jump, you can't really do that with the face buttons because B and X are opposite from each other on a Switch controller. So just using those, like, that's really awesome. And then in other games I've found, like right now I'm playing Raidou Remastered, the Atlas game, and there are so many buttons involved in the combat for that like I put roll, and I put the minus button, the select button, which is enemy identification, to like bring up their stats. So again, it's back buttons are very useful. This is by far the best implementation on like an actual first party controller I've seen of that concept. They're also they're flush with the back of the controller, so you're never going to hit them by accident, because your hands can just sit on them like normal, and you would have to pull in to operate them. So they work really, really well. But on top of that, this controller has everything that was good about the Switch 1 Pro controller, which is a famously really ergonomic, comfortable controller, and still is. They've improved a lot. The sticks are fantastic. These are the best feeling sticks I've felt on a controller like this. They have a lot of range of movement. They feel like the tuning on them, the way they've the tightening is just kind of perfect for the range of motion. They're very quiet. They click really well, just like I think the sticks are the weak point on the DualSense, and I think they're pretty good on the Xbox controllers, but I think these are better than both of those. So that's really nice. The face buttons are nice and big. All of that stuff is good. The triggers, which are still digital, not analog, but that's because that's how Nintendo games work on the Switch, so I'm totally fine with that, because for most games, honestly, that's what you want anyway. There's a reason why the Xbox Elite controller and the DualSense Edge lets you tune your triggers to be digital instead of analog, so I'm fine with that. The D-pad is improved. That was the big weakness on the Switch 1 Pro controller. It is now on a more flat surface, so it is still not a perfect D-pad. I still would say I prefer the Xbox D-pad over this, but I would say it's basically on par with the PlayStation D-pad. I think it feels fine. And then they've also added a headphone jack for audio, and that also is really well done, because also getting to the headphone audio is just open the home button and it's right there. You don't have to go through any menus, so you don't have to go searching for it. It's just right there. So the UI is really quick and easy for this. And then in terms of other changes they've made, instead of having sort of a grippy textured plastic on the handles, which is what a lot of controllers like Xbox and DualSense have gone with, this controller tells me that someone at Nintendo is a sweaty gaming mouse nerd, because this controller uses the same kind of plastic coating as a lot of modern gaming mice in the last 2 or 3 years. So for instance, I have a Razer V3 Viper Hyperspeed, and the Viper V3 Pro is the same way, and so is the Death Adder V3 Wired. These are Razer mice.
You gotta love the way that gaming mouse are named.
I know, they're crazy. But a lot of gaming mice do this now, where they have, instead of any kind of texture, they have a matte plastic, and then the coating is kind of known as a soft touch coating, where it feels very soft to the touch. And at the first time you pick it up, you might even think it feels a little slippery, but you'll find that your hand locks into it very fast, because obviously this is something you're holding for a period of time, and you just get locked into it in a really nice way. And it doesn't have the problem that grippy plastic with a texture has, where that grip will wear away over time. My original DualSense, that grip is mostly gone. This will not have any kind of wear away effect. And the plastic on the Switch 2 Pro controller is almost identical to what is on modern Razer mice, and I fucking love it. I think it's great. It is the right kind of coating for this. Again, the first time you pick it up, it'll feel a little awkward to you, but you'll find how quickly it locks into your hands, and I really, really like it. And I think all of that combined makes this a really incredible controller. Obviously, it also has the really good HD Rumble 2. It has the gyro and all of that good stuff that you would expect from a modern controller that isn't Xbox, because Xbox still doesn't have any of that stuff. And it doesn't have any unnecessary shit on it either, like the big touchpad or something. It's all there. The C button is nice and out of the way. You'll never accidentally hit it. And if you do need to use game chat, it's there for you. So yeah, this is an incredible controller. I think if you had to pay full price for it, and you didn't have any kind of trade-in or discount, and you already had a Switch 1 Pro controller, it would be harder to recommend, because it is a fairly modest upgrade on that. But if you do have if you can trade in your Switch 1 Pro controller, get a little bit off of it, if you like the idea of those back buttons, it's a fantastic controller. Probably the best Nintendo has made since, probably the GameCube controller. It's a very, very good controller.
Yeah, and for the GameCube controller, that is for one video game, which is Smash Bros. Melee, and all other video games. Third-party developers in the GameCube era were very troubled.
It depends, yes.
Controller almost being a controller that worked for their games, but just, that C-stick, nah, it's not quite an analog stick. And they didn't have a second Z button for a shoulder button for reasons nobody will ever know. I'm always amused by some of the weird foibles of the GameCube controller. Yeah, that sounds really good. I think the only trick they're missing is they should have named it something cooler. If they're going to take the plastic from Gaming Mice, they should have taken the name idea and called it like the Hell Cobra or something fucking metal as fuck.
Yeah, and, again, it is expensive. It's $85, but, that's not that. I think a DualSense is $75.
Yeah.
This does have back buttons. Again, if you take an Xbox controller and you want a rechargeable battery in it, that's close to, $100 now. So this is not that crazy. Other than that, obviously, it's not packed in with the console, because the default controller for Switch is the Joy-Cons, which, as I mentioned last time, are also much, much improved, and the Joy-Con 2 rocks. So those are great also. Then in terms of games, I've played a few more games, including, like I just said, I've been playing Raidou Remastered. We mentioned this on a news segment a few months ago because we were both excited about this. This is a remaster of, let me see if I can remember the title of the original game, Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner, Raidou Kuzunoha, and the Mystery of the Soulless Army. This one is called Raidou Remastered, The Mystery of the Soulless Army. And so this is a remaster. It's actually closer to a remake. The remaster is almost like a misnomer, I would say, on this one, of a PS2-era Atlas game that is a Shin Megami Tensei spin-off. This is an action RPG with the character Raidou Kuzunoha, who is a devil summoner and a detective. And so it is a delightful mishmash of genres where it is a detective video game where you have, your detective agency you go to and hang out with your friend, your detective buddies, and then you go out on cases and you interrogate people and you solve stuff. But then you also go to the Shadow World and you are a devil summoner and you befriend demons, and then you have action RPG battles with them in those dungeon environments. And it is a bunch of different things, and I love basically everything this game is doing. It is very, very cool. Have you played any of this yet, Sean? I know you were interested in it.
No, I've not. I've been doing a lot of other stuff, but I do definitely want to find time for it because I've always been very interested in these Raidou games because they've got a really good reputation, and I'm glad that you're enjoying it.
Yeah, so Raidou Remastered, this is, again, the first of the Raidou PS2 games. I have not played that game, but I've done some research so I could talk about it here. And my understanding is that not only is this, a remake graphically more than it is a remaster. The original game, I know for its open 3D environments had pre-rendered backgrounds. This does not, so they've had to graphically remake everything, although they've done it in the style of a PS2 game, which I think is right because that mixes with the character models and the art style and everything, and it has a very charming PS2 era look to it, but maybe more the PS2 of your memory than a literal PS2 game. So I like that. But then the big thing they've overhauled, to my understanding, is the combat, because the combat was more in the original game cool in theory than it was to play. The sequel, Raidou 2, whatever it was, Devil Summoner 2, Raidou in the blah blah blah, whatever that one was called, improved the combat a lot. It's basically taken the Raidou 2 combat, but then even added more onto it. What it is for this game, it's so cool. It is an action RPG, so you are controlling Raidou himself in the environment, and you can have up to 2 demons out in the field with you as you're fighting the enemy monsters. And those demons, obviously, you capture them. It's almost more like Pokemon than it is in other Shin Megami Tensei games. There's no demon negotiation. It's just on the field, you activate a skill, and then you capture the demon if you do it right. And so then you have your demons with you. And as in a lot of Shin Megami Tensei games, the demons are very characterized. They talk to you, they hang out with you. In this game, they have all sorts of extra abilities on the field. They help you with your detective work. So some demons can read the minds of people. So if they're cagey, you can read their mind. If they're lethargic and won't talk, you can ignite them. The Pyrojack character, what's his name? Not Jack Frost. Pyrojack.
Yeah, is it just Pyrojack?
I think it is. I think they might have given him a different name in this one, but whatever it is, it's Pyrojack. He can ignite their spirit, and then they'll want to do their stuff. There's all sorts of detective abilities they can do. But then in combat, they basically this game came out the same year as Persona 3, and you can see a similar sensibility because they are all AI controlled, but you can give them little indications of what you do or don't want them to do. But basically, they take care of themselves. They'll attack and exploit the enemy's weaknesses, and you do physical moves with your sword, and you have basically Y for your light attacks, X for your heavy attacks, and then you have some combos you can do with that, and then you also have some magic you can do yourself. I'm still fairly early into the game, so I haven't unlocked like everything in the combat suite, but it's complicated, like complicated in a very fun way. Like when it comes together, it's not like hard to understand, but there's a lot of pieces to it, and so the combat is just like very fun, both in short bursts where you like fight one enemy on the field, or in like the big boss battles, which can get pretty complicated and in depth. So all of that is really fun. Like in the overworld, like exploring, it's all set in Taisho era Japan, and I very much enjoy that recreation. The main street where you start, I now have a little bit of a small conspiracy theory, which is I'm pretty sure it is geometrically the exact same as Inaba, the main street in Persona 4. And the fact that Persona 4 was made 2 years later on a pretty tight timetable makes me think that Inaba is just a reskin of the main area in this game. At least that main street you go through, where like you run and the crows like fly at your feet in Persona 4, it's pretty much the same, but in Taisho era Japan, and that made me laugh very hard. But yeah, and then you have all of your demon fusion and all that stuff. If you've played a Persona or a Shin Megami Tensei, it's all those familiar elements, but in an action RPG where you're also doing like running around doing detective work, and that's fun. The best two things about this game, though, are both the audio. One is that this is a Shoji Meguro score. This is one of his original solo scores, and again, the same year as Persona 3. So if you are nostalgic for the Meguro sounds of that Persona 3 and 4 era, this is totally in line with that, and it's really, really good. Like, there's a lot of songs that feel like they could have just been in Persona 3 or 4. Not a lot of the vocal stuff that those games have, but the instrumental stuff, like, oh, it's just killer. It's just a great soundtrack. Honestly, that's what convinced me to pick this game up, is I was watching a review, and at one point, the reviewer, like, stopped talking to just show the combat, and then it was playing the combat song, and I went, oh, fuck, I have to play this. That's a Shoji Meguro score. I didn't even have to look it up. I know that's Shoji Meguro. And it's awesome, so that's great. Then the voice cast for this game. It has an English dub. I don't give a shit about that. The Japanese, Sean, have you looked at the cast for this game?
Yeah, well, because I did originally, because I was curious if they had Sugita play the main dude, because I know he did later, but I don't think he was voiced in the original version. But yes, I know it has like an incredible cast.
Incredible cast. Raidou, who is a silent character, but he like yells out the names of demons. That is Sugita Tomokazu, our boy Kyon from Haruhi. Your main character you hear voiced is the cat, like, who's actually a person, but he's in the body of a cat, but he's your, like, helper, and he does all the talking, kind of like Morgana in Persona 5, but not like Morgana, because the voice is very different. It is Nakata Joji. It is the bad guy from Fate Stay Night, the deepest voice on Earth. It is such an amazing voice to hear coming out of a cat. Oh my god. Narumi, the guy who runs your detective agency, is Koyasu Takahito, who we've talked about. He's Mulaflaga in Gundam Seed. Just amazing. Banjo Ginga is Dr. Victor, the guy who runs this game's version of the Velvet Room. So, like, this game's Igor, basically, is a Ginga Banjo performance, and it is amazing, and just it keeps going and going. I just met, there's a Yakuza boss character who's voiced by Suwabe Junichi, and he's great. It's just, down the line, it is, like, an incredible all-star cast, and, like, this, even if the gameplay kind of sucked, this would be worth it just to have a game where your main vocal companion is Nakata Joji, doing like a gravitas voiced cat. Unbelievable. I love it so much.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through the Japanese Wikipedia page, and yes, it is a ridiculously stacked voice cast. That's very cool.
Yeah. So anyway, that game rocks. Another Switch, and that game is on Switch 2. It's also on Switch 1. It's also on PlayStation and PC, so you can get it wherever. I'm playing specifically the Switch 2 version, and it looks and runs great on Switch 2. So yeah, that's basically what you would expect. The other Switch 2 exclusive, though, that I've been playing is Fast Fusion. This is the new game from Shinen Multimedia, who have made a bunch of various indie games, but they are famous for this series, the Fast series. The Switch 1 launched with a game called Fast RMX. This is basically the next version of that, and the Fast racing games are basically modern F-Zero games, because Nintendo doesn't make F-Zero, so like these feel like if they made an F-Zero GX2 today, this is what this would look like. And they're really great games. Fast RMX was a super impressive Switch 1 launch title, and Fast Fusion is a very impressive Switch 2 launch title. It is It basically, if you've played these games before, it is that kind of futuristic racer where you're going incredibly fast on the track, but you have a lot of control over your car. They've added some stuff in this one, like in addition to your boost mechanic, which is a basic F-Zero thing, you also have a jump, so you can jump the car, and it's a really big jump where you can like jump to another part of the track. It makes for more like secrets and whatnot going on in the track environments, and that's really cool. Still has great music, and it is also a really visually, graphically ambitious game for the Nintendo Switch hardware, and it looks great with one asterisk, and this is actually why I wanted to bring it up, because I think this is a great game. It's only $15, and I think it's more than fully featured enough that they could have charged $40 or $50 for it. So it's an absolute steal, and you should get it. But it is also interesting visually, because it is... they did a patch recently to patch in another visual mode, but until then its visual modes were all using DLSS, and frankly abusing DLSS. I don't know if you've seen like the Digital Foundry video on this, Sean, but it's fascinating because this game is running with very low internal resolutions, and it's using DLSS to get up to either 1440p or native 4K with DLSS. The problem is the resolutions are too low, and this is a really, really fast game, so it's having to draw those, not interpolated frames, but like those upscaled frames at a just ridiculous speed, and it makes for something that's very visually soupy. It makes for an image that is extremely shimmery. The AI is just bugging out everywhere. You're having a lot of like sort of DLSS hallucinations in the image where it is breaking down and imagining things that aren't supposed to be there. So any kind of like, wireframe that you'll see around will have a lot of like ghosting and like artifacts around it. The track itself will shimmer a lot. There's like, for instance, there's a level that's in the desert and the track is over sand, and the DLSS doesn't really know whether it's sand or track it's looking at, so it'll often just be a track that looks like it's half sand as it goes along. So it's like a really this is not how DLSS really should be used. Both the resolutions, it's pushing too far on the resolution, but also the game is moving too fast. They did patch in what they're calling a pure mode, and that mode is a dynamic 1440p, taking out some of the shadows and lighting effects, and then having no DLSS, but also no other anti-aliasing solution. I do think that is the best mode on average. It depends on the track and like how things go, but overall I think the pure mode works best because the lack of anti-aliasing is a problem. It does make for a very jagged looking image in places, but it is also quite a bit more stable looking than the DLSS mode. Like, if you're sensitive to that shimmer effect or the way the track kind of disappears under you, it won't have any of that. It's just no anti-aliasing. I do feel like there must be a better in between than horribly abusing DLSS and not using any anti-aliasing whatsoever. So maybe they can fix it at some point. As of now, this is a really cool racing game with that one asterisk, but it is also interesting, technically, because you can switch those graphic options on the fly, and it is kind of fascinating to see a home console having this many graphics options and that aggressive a use of DLSS.
Yeah, it's just interesting because, obviously we've gotten used to on Xbox and PlayStation, primarily FSR as your kind of, machine learning based upscale solution. Now you've got on PS5 Pro, you've got the PSSR. That was rocky in a lot of games early on, now has been quite good, particularly in games like Assassin's Creed Shadows that added PSSR in a patch after launch. That really helped the look of that game because you have a toggle and you can turn it on and off. So yeah, we've seen this in other places, but if people recall, this is one of my main reasons for buying a PS5 Pro was that I am it is one of the things that I think I'm kind of sensitive to in video game visuals is that that weird breakup in machine learning upscaling solutions. Yes. And so you just had some of those games using FSR2, and even sometimes games that it wasn't a terrible part of it, but even something like Resident Evil 4 Remake at launch, we just had this really crunchy, weird look and that instability. And there's some cases where for me, if it gets really severe, it almost makes me weirdly motion sick or something. I remember looking at videos of Star Wars Outlaws because I was curious about that game. And it was a very high resolution streaming video on YouTube. So I don't think it was the streaming thing, but it was just looking at the that the grass in the game, it's kind of what you're talking about with like the track in Fast Fusion, where it's like the upscaling solution doesn't kind of know what it's trying to resolve, and so it's just this weird mush. And if your eye's trying to lock onto a detail, it can't, and it almost like gives me a weird sense of vertigo if it's really bad, because it's like I'm trying to see something, but there's no actual like thing to be focused on because of how swimmy and weird the detail is. And so, yeah, watching the DF video for Fast Fusion was very interesting, because this is the first time we've seen DLSS used on a console, because obviously it's not available on Xbox or PlayStation because they're not NVIDIA GPUs. And this kind of like is also something that gives you a little bit of insight into this mysterious, like kind of lighter weight version of DLSS that has a worse output, but also a less expensive kind of process. That was implied by NVIDIA that there was something that that Nintendo had access to that was a different DLSS model that was less expensive to run, but obviously then would have a less desirable outcome. But if you're doing a handheld console, like the full PC version of DLSS is not always going to be a great option. And I think it's been interesting to see the kind of like results from different games. It seems like some games like Cyberpunk and Street Fighter 6 have had like really, really great results. And then you've seen Fast Fusion is the most extreme example possible on the console currently. And you see how like that can break down. And there's like the fucking Hogwarts game or whatever seems to have a kind of rough one based on the videos.
The Hogwarts one actually looks pretty good to me. Like I was watching through that, and I think the Hogwarts Legacy one, the thing there is that it is, I think if you were like really trying to put it through its paces, but that's a slow game where you're walking around, it's 30 FPS. It's some stuff like in the foliage you'll notice it, but in just the main stuff you're looking at, it's fine. I think the problem with Fast Fusion is the kind of game it is. Like, yeah. I'm actually overall really impressed by the DLSS use on Switch 2 so far. Like, Cyberpunk and Street Fighter 6 are notably producing a much better looking image than the past gen versions like PS4. And even for Street Fighter, a much better looking image than the Xbox Series S, which is like pretty surprising because like the upscaling solution on the Series S for Street Fighter 6 just wasn't very good. And so like the Switch 2 version of Street Fighter 6 looks way better. And I think Cyberpunk might even be the same way.
Well, you're also in a situation where the Switch 2 has more available memory than the Series S does.
Yes.
So it's like specifically with the Series S, I think there's like just a texture resolution difference because there's a memory difference there. Yeah. Which both speaks to like that the Switch 2 is really well designed, and also that is still like the pain point on the Series S is that the memory is not scaled appropriately for the kind of device that it is.
Pokemon Violet, Scarlet and Violet, those also are believed to be using DLSS, and I believe those are the only Nintendo launch games that we know of that have that. But the Switch 2 upgrades of those, like, they're DLSSing, and they look really good. Like, that's a very clean resolve. There is, like, if you look in the far background of some images on foliage, if you're moving, you'll see some of the breakup, but it's the kind of stuff you can live with and is, like, worth the trade-off, right? And that's always going to be the question with these, right? Of that these upscalers, particularly on a home console, are generally not going to be perfect, but there are ways that they can be much better to alternative solutions, but it is going to depend on the game. Super fast racing game, 60 FPS, going by like crazy, that is rendering at an internally low resolution, no, don't do it. But like, Street Fighter 6, absolutely that can work, or Cyberpunk, or Hogwarts Legacy, but yeah.
Yeah, it's the thing I'll just be curious to see as we move into a phase where there will be more like PS5 exclusive like level games, something like Star Wars Outlaws, which is announced. Like that will be the thing that'll be interesting to see, like how low are developers willing to go for that internal resolution, kind of relying on DLSS, because obviously like Star Wars Outlaws on PS5 and the Series X already, it's not great. It's like I said, it made me looking at a video of it kind of weirdly nauseous, to the point where I was like, I don't need to pick up this game on, because I was looking at it because it was when the game was on a ridiculous sale. I'm like, I'm good. Yeah. And so I think like DLSS obviously is a very powerful tool, and you can see how when it's used well on games that are well suited for it, it is going to allow the Switch 2 to punch above its what we would typically think of as its weight relative to the other consoles, because DLSS is just much more capable than something like FSR2. So on something like a Street Fighter 6, it's just a way better technology than what that game was using on than what that game is using on PS5 and Series X. It's just PS5 and Series X have so much higher internal resolution, it doesn't matter. But if you're something like the Series S, like it will produce better outcomes. The thing that will be just like interesting to see from an academic point of view is that more like the equivalent of The Witcher 3 for the Switch 1. Like, right. What are those games that are really pushing the boundaries of what is feasible for a mobile platform? And I'm just excited as a fan of like weird video game shit. Like, I just want to see what's going to be the next game that like just destroys DLSS like Fast Fusion and creates like these insane visual results, just because it's just like an interesting thing that you don't often see.
Yeah, and I just have to believe that, like, with Fast Fusion, there is a better solution somewhere that you could use. Like, there's some better mixture of, like, could you use a TAOO? Like, something, I don't know. But, like, there's got to be something better between those extremes of no anti-aliasing whatsoever and horribly abusing DLSS. So we shall see. But yeah, I mean, the Switch 2 is super technically impressive, I think. That's the thing that I've kept coming back to after a month with it. The main game I've played in the launch window actually is the Breath of the Wild upgrade. I wound up really falling down that rabbit hole, and I played that game all the way through, and I beat it last week, and it just looks just spectacular all the way through, whether you're playing it handheld, whether you're playing it docked, especially docked. And like, that's one of the big surprises for me, is that the Switch 1 often was a case, and this is partially because when the Switch 1 came out, TVs weren't as good as they are now. Most people didn't own OLEDs, that kind of thing. But like, also the Switch 1 is just a weaker system. I often found, particularly the later we got in the Switch 1's lifespan, that Switch games just looked better on the handheld screen. And if you blew them up to the TV, some games were fine, but a lot, like, I just preferred to play handheld. They felt more comfortable there. The delta is so much bigger here. Like, the games look good on the Switch 2 handheld screen. I think that screen looks good, and it's 1080p and all that. But, like, you take, Zelda Breath of the Wild is maxing out the handheld screen, but then you put it on the TV, and it's really astonishing there. And, like, I feel much more incentivized to dock my Switch and play it on the TV than I usually did with the Switch 1. And that's been across a range of games, and I've been, like, that's, like, recalibrating how I play my Switch even, and that's been an interesting thing for me. One other thing I've played that I didn't get to talk about last time is they did add the GameCube app for Nintendo Switch Online. It is a Switch 2 exclusive, because I assume the GameCube takes more power to emulate. So you have, although Switch 1 had Super Mario Sunshine in the Mario 35 collection, so who knows?
Switch 1 could do it.
Yeah. Sure. May have been more work depending on, like, the game, but who knows? But the GameCube app at launch had 3 games. Now it has 4. The 4 are The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, F-Zero GX, Soul Calibur 2, the GameCube version that had Link in it, and Super Mario Strikers they just added, the Mario soccer game. And I've been having a lot of fun in the GameCube app. One thing that's actually kind of cool, I didn't even realize, because when I had a GameCube, I obviously had a 4x3 tube TV, but 3 of those 4 games had widescreen modes built in, and they're still active and they work on the Switch Online app. So you can go in, switch the game to 16:9, and it'll play that way on your Switch, and that's really cool. And some of them, like Soul Calibur 2, the menus are all just 4x3 stretched out, but when you get into gameplay, it is proper 16:9. And Mario Strikers and F-Zero GX look pretty good that way too. The game that I have been losing myself to is Super Mario Strikers. I know people love that game. I had never played it. I didn't own it as a kid. I'd never touched that game. That is a fucking phenomenal sports game. It is, like, so crazily addictive. I have no affection in my body for soccer. I'm sorry, I'm American, guys. I know I should be calling it football, but it's not my thing. That game is so fun. The way you go around the track, the way it's, like, weirdly violent, where you just fucking tackle people and you can send them into the wall, and the walls are electrocuted. So if you're Mario and you want to take the ball from Yoshi, you can just shove him into the wall, electrocute Yoshi, he'll drop the ball, and then you can, have your Toad come in and grab it. It's crazy fun, and I'm so glad they put that on the GameCube app, because that's been a big discovery for me.
Sports video games used to be good. That's one of those things that we have lost, is that there was a time when, like, people made good sports video games that were fun to play, even if you did not like that sport. Like, I loved the NBA Street games back in, like, that PS2 generation. Like, those games were so fucking good. And there's a bunch of stuff like that. Super Mario Strikers is a good example. Like tennis games used to fucking rule. Like those games were great. I don't give a fuck about tennis. But like, when those kinds of more arcadey sports games used to be so good, and now it's all just like simulation. You have to be, like the biggest fucking sports nerd in the world to give a shit, and then, spend all of your money that you're haven't spent on sports betting on your ultimate team cards or whatever, and all that shit. It's just like, it feels like if you want to play a sports video game now, that's the only video game you can play. It's nice to remember another time when there were sports video games for like the hardcore people, and then there's also the one where you can kick the dinosaur into the electrified fence and laugh at him. You had flavors for everybody.
It's so good. I can't wait to go play more of it. But yeah, so I'm very much enjoying my time with the Switch 2. I think it's a great system, really cool upgrade. Do you have any other like technical or other questions to ask me about it now that I've had it for a month?
I guess this isn't necessarily a Switch 2 question. I'm just curious because you said you replayed all the way through Breath of the Wild. Where are you at with Breath of the Wild versus Tears of the Kingdom now that you've gone all the way back after Tears of the Kingdom came out?
That's a good question, and I very much intend on going back to Tears of the Kingdom and playing that again as well, because I want to see it in this upgrade. And Tears of the Kingdom I never 100%ed the way I did Breath of the Wild back in the day. I think right now I would say I prefer Breath of the Wild, because I think the thing that got me back into it this time is that I'd kind of forgotten with Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom, and understandably, this is not a criticism of Tears of the Kingdom, but Tears of the Kingdom being a sequel that reuses that map, although it added a ton above and below that map, it does not incentivize you to explore quite the same way, because it knows you've been to that world. So what it's about is giving you tools to explore that world in a different way. And Tears of the Kingdom is, as a result, a much faster game where you're able to move around that world faster. You can build all these contraptions. You can get past problems with all these tools you have. Whereas Breath of the Wild is very much open you up into this world, and you have to walk it, until eventually you get a horse. In the DLC, you get the motorcycle, but in both of those cases, you're going to take a while to get, like, good versions of that. And the tools you have are for sort of specific problem-solving solutions and things like that, but none of them are going to, like, speed up how you move through the game. And so Breath of the Wild is my favorite version of this kind of thing, knowing that I'm also someone who loves, your Metroidvania kind of thing, where it is about dropping you into the world and asking you to go explore it and understand the world and what you have to do through environmental cues and all of that stuff. And so I'd kind of forgotten just how much I loved that aspect of Breath of the Wild, and I'd kind of worried that Tears of the Kingdom was the kind of sequel that would make it harder to go back, in the way like Marvel's Spider-Man 2 makes it hard to go play Marvel's Spider-Man 1 because you can't move through the city the same way. But I think Breath of the Wild just encourages a completely different kind of engagement with the world than Tears of the Kingdom does. So, if anything, I don't know if I would say it's made me think one is better than the other, but it has made me see how distinct they are, despite being so similar graphically and mechanically. Like, I do think they just encourage a very different kind of engagement with the world you're in. And for Breath of the Wild, I think that's a more evergreen game than I maybe thought it was after playing Tears of the Kingdom. Like, I had a lot of fun going back to it and feeling that feeling I had 8 years ago when it came out, of discovering Hyrule for the first time and, having to walk from the Great Plateau to Kakariko Village and discover it. And like, just the fact that like I started out this Breath of the Wild gameplay or playthrough with like no plan. I wasn't like, I'm going to go here first or here first. I was just wandering, and like I just stumbled into Kakariko Village, and I'm like, all right, this is here. And I just kind of wound up going to, I think, the Zora's Domain on accident for, like that kind of thing. And just like having fun with it that way and going around and having no plan. And it was fun to see how I hit so many things in totally different orders than I did the first time and all of that. And it does make me excited to give Tears of the Kingdom another try later on and see how I feel about that too. Because these are really remarkable, remasters of the games, I guess you would call them.
Cool. And then Mario Kart, like, have you been doing a lot of that? Like, how are you, because you had only had like a day or two with the game last time we talked about it. What are your feelings on that, having a lot more time?
I dig it. I think Mario Kart World rocks. It's, it's the kind of game, I know there are some obsessive Mario Kart fans who will play that all day, every day. I'm not that kind of Mario Kart player, so it's definitely something where it's never been my main game I'm playing, but I will go into it for short bursts and do a Grand Prix or do some online racing or whatever. But I actually, when we talked about it the first time, I had not yet tried Knockout Tour. Knockout Tour is the other main single-player mode in this, and it is so cool. I fucking adore Knockout Tour. So the way Mario Kart works is as in every Mario Kart game, you have your Grand Prix. And I described in our last podcast the way Grand Prix work in Mario Kart World, where it is 4 races, and they are distinct. They each have like a winner, but they are geographically linked. So at the end of each race, you start the next one, right? Yeah. The way Knockout Tours work is they are different configurations of tracks, and there's, I think, just as many of them as there are Grand Tours. So there's like 6 to 8 Knockout Tours, but each one of them strings parts of the world together completely differently than the Grand Prix, because Mario Kart World fundamentally is built on one big contiguous landmass. And so Knockout Tour is, I forget if it's 6 or 8 of these, but it's some number of different like routes through the world. And the way Knockout Tour works is you just go from start to finish. It never stops until the entire thing is over. It's not like a Grand Prix where there's 4 distinct races. And it's a battle royale kind of thing where it starts with 24 racers, and then the first 20 to reach the first threshold continue, but those 4 who didn't reach that get knocked out. Then it's 16, then it's 12, 8, 4, and then the final 4 are racing for first. And you just go. And that is maybe my favorite Mario Kart mode I've ever played. The way it leverages the contiguous like landmass nature of the Mario Kart World map, and then the way you're racing for a solid like 10 to 15 minutes for the length of one of these things, and there's no breaks, there's no stops, and you're having to like furiously try to keep in the main zone of, are you in the top 24, are you in the top 20, top 16? That's really addictive. I've only won one of the Knockout Tours in first so far. You had to get like in the top 3 on each of them to unlock mirror mode, and I did do that. But like they're properly hard. Like the CPUs are harder than they are in the Grand Prix. And I think Knockout Tour is a super fun online mode in the way a lot of Battle Royale kind of things are. And so it's one of my favorite things in Mario Kart World. And I didn't realize that it was its own like full thing. I'd seen the option on the menu, but I didn't know what it was. And so when I started playing with it, I really, really loved it.
Yeah, that sounds cool. That sounds like a smart evolution of Mario Kart to have, like you have your kind of like, new spin on the classic mode with Grand Prix. But like, I definitely think like if I were playing Mario Kart, it sounds like knockout mode would be a lot more interesting to me, because I do think like, one of my things with Mario Kart is I like when I was playing those games, I would do like one Grand Prix and just get very bored of it. Like, like it's hard to do more than to do 2 of those in a row. Even though like my brother, like on Mario Kart 64, which is the one I played the most because my brother liked to play it. He just liked to play Mario Kart fucking constantly. And I'm like, I'm good. Like we did our Mario Kart thing. It's like, it's fun. But it's just like kind of like tiring. Just like there's something about the way you describe that knockout mode just feels like it has an additional level of tension to it. That Mario Kart maybe normally doesn't always have. Yes. And that sounds like a nice addition. That makes it maybe a little bit more like of a modern mode for a game like that.
I agree. And then I also still really enjoy the open world mode. I know there's complaints of people who think it's too empty of things to do. I kind of disagree. One, I think its main purpose is just like, because it is not presented in the menus as like the main thing. It does, I think it's presented this way. It's a bonus where you get to go around and just have fun exploring this very weird racing logic world that they've put together that is contiguous but also makes no sense in a weird way. And I find that very fun. In the same, like again, I described it another Spider-Man comparison. It feels to me kind of like when you go into Spider-Man just to swing around and have fun doing that. That's kind of the main thing with this, but there are a lot of like little challenges peppered throughout the world and things to find, and I enjoy all of that. So, if you're someone in a video game driven more by like extrinsic motivations of like, here's your collectathon that you have to get, or here's a bunch of goals to do, or you need a story mode, it's not maybe going to be your bag. But if you're more on the intrinsic side of, I'm glad that there's a mode that just sets me free in the world to go try stuff, that's really fun. Also, the racing mechanics in Mario Kart World are quite a bit deeper than in other Mario Kart games, and that's something I've learned over the last month. Like, there's a new, basically neutral drift mode that allows you to do tricks even when you're not jumping off of something, and allows you to make jumps onto the rails or onto the walls and all of that stuff. And I've been having fun trying to like get better at the game that way. And the open world is a great place for that, because you can just go in and practice wherever you want, and then go back into the racing and do that. So I think it's a pretty great package, and I've really been enjoying it.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds good. Like, everything I've heard from people online just sounds like people are very, very into it.
And, you know, you've also got to remember, this is a launch game. This is a much more fully featured Mario Kart than Mario Kart 8 was in its launch on Wii U. It's easy to forget because Mario Kart 8 had a bunch of DLC on Wii U. Then it was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on Switch, which had a battle mode added, because Mario Kart 8 did not have a real battle mode at launch. And then they added more and more DLC to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So Mario Kart 8 Deluxe right now feels like it's got more stuff than Mario Kart World, but Mario Kart World is brand new, and it already has much more than Mario Kart 8 did at launch. And so I'm excited to see what they do with it in the future as well, because I assume this will be a game Nintendo will want to support, because it's Mario Kart.
Yes, it is the Nintendo video game.
Yes.
So yes.
Anyway, so that's all my Switch 2 stuff. What else have you been up to, Sean?
Well, one thing I've been up to, I've been wanting to talk about this for a little bit on the podcast, is an update on my Ultraman journey, where I've been watching through all the Ultraman shows. For people who don't remember, I'm in the 90s, or I'm basically now done with the 90s of Ultraman. I've watched a little bit of 2000s era Ultraman at this point. Not to say that it's particularly different just because it went over the Millennium line, but it felt like a big moment to me that I was like, oh, this Ultraman movie was made in the year 2000. Holy shit. But last time I talked about it, we were talking about Ultraman Tiga and Ultraman Dyna, which were like the first two 90s era shows, Ultraman Dyna being a direct sequel to Ultraman Tiga that features some of the same characters set in the same world. And the thing that I have finished I want to talk about today is the show after that, which is Ultraman Gaia, which was made from 1998 to August of 1999. And this is maybe the best Ultraman. This show it's ridiculously good. This is like, of the ones I have seen so far, which obviously there's a lot of like the modern Ultramans that I have not yet seen yet. But of all the ones I've seen so far, this is like the easiest one to recommend for people by far. Especially if you like anime. I think you would like Ultraman Gaia, because it is like the anime Ultraman, and more specifically, it's like the Gundam Ultraman, because it is structured much more like a kind of anime or Gundam show. It uses a lot of those tropes, and it is definitely like a big step in like the evolution of Ultraman into a more modern style TV show. Because Ultraman Tiga, which was the thing that brought Ultraman back after it was gone for a long time, is like a great show that is a very much structured like a classic Ultraman show, that it is super episodic, but it had some more like, we're doing a bit more with the characters. When you get to Ultraman Gaia, what Ultraman Gaia is doing is it's building much more of an overarching narrative and much bigger, more dramatic character arcs, and it's doing that in a very anime-esque way. And specifically, one of the things that gives it that feel is the head writer for the show is a guy named Chiaki J. Konaka, who is an anime writer who's done a lot of big stuff. Probably his most acclaimed project is he's the main writer for Serial Experiments Lane. He is also the main writer for Digimon Tamers, the third Digimon show, which is the best Digimon show, in terms of like qualitatively. That's the one that is like the kind of fucked up dark Digimon show, because Chiaki J. Konaka is also a big H.P. Lovecraft guy, to the point where he has written multiple Cthulhu Mythos books, and so he likes to have that kind of Lovecraftian horror, cosmic horror kind of vibe, and that is just such a fucking perfect fit for Ultraman. Because the big thing with Ultraman Gaia, it's set in its own continuity. You don't need to watch any of the other Ultraman shows. Not that you ever really need to see the other Ultraman shows, but there's not going to be like the cameo episode where the character from the last show comes over. Like all the old Ultraman shows had like a couple episodes like that. Ultraman Dyna, very much you should see Ultraman Tiga first, because it makes Ultraman Dyna much richer. Ultraman Gaia is wholly its own thing. And it's basically about this mysterious force that is seemingly attacking Earth by sending monsters through, or like creating weird disturbances. And it is this kind of Lovecraftian thing. It's called like, how you could translate it in a bunch of different ways, but it's generally called like the harbinger of radical destruction or something like that, like this entity that will bring like radical destruction and change to humanity and will like destroy the earth as we understand it to be, but it kind of exists somewhere out there in space, and it is through some means like attacking and invading earth, and it has this kind of like weird cosmic horror vibe to it. And then you have your main character is this character named Takayama Gamu, who is very different than other Ultraman protagonists because he's like a boy genius character, which is one of those very anime feeling things. Now, when I say boy genius, he's like 20 or something. He's in college, but he's notably feels much younger than your average Ultraman protagonist. That's kind of usually like a 30-year-old something dude who's like a full adult. And Gamu is introduced to you as this very kind of naive but brilliant young man, who is part of this whole kind of like team of geniuses around the world who are trying to invent things to help humanity stave off this invasion that they foresee is coming. And then, of course, in the first episode, the invasion happens, and Gamu, who was studying this like weird, like, I don't even know how to describe it, like you know, collective unconscious something or whatever. He accesses some sort of weird power deep within the heart of humanity, and that is Ultraman Gaia. And then he uses that power to join forces with the whole team of like XIG or Zig, which is like your crazy team of like all the different forces on Earth come together to fight this invasion. And from there, it is, you know, has its Ultraman structure. Every episode has some kind of monster or threat that attacks, and Ultraman must go to defend the Earth and fight alongside his allies who don't know that he's Ultraman Gaia. So he's like kind of on the one hand, he's a scientific advisor for this military team. On the other hand, he is secretly Ultraman Gaia. But there's a lot more they add on to this that other Ultraman shows don't have. Most specifically, there is a rival character. This show has a Vegeta in it. So if you wanted an Ultraman that has a Vegeta, this has a Vegeta. So you have another character who is another kind of member of this team of geniuses. And he gets access to another Ultraman that's a blue Ultraman called Ultraman Agul. But you have this kind of dynamic for the first half of the show where Gamu/Gaia is fighting to defend both Earth and humanity, whereas Fujiyama/Agul, he is fighting to defend the Earth, but he kind of views humanity as being part of the problem, right? This has a very kind of environmentalist kind of storyline to it, where he sees humanity as being sort of a parasite on Earth, not too different from the monsters that are attacking it. And so he's like, I need to stop this alien invader, but also like, if humanity gets fucking destroyed in the process, that's not my problem. And so you have these two competing ideals and viewpoints, and it's about the clash of those two viewpoints. Obviously, eventually Gamu, as this kind of young optimist who has to learn the harsh realities of the world, but never really let go of that dream and optimism that he has. That's, of course, he's the Amuro-esque character from Original Gundam. Like, he has to have that, and that is ultimately the prevailing ideology, is this more optimistic one, that humanity can find a way to live in harmony with the Earth. But it has this compelling philosophical divide, and it is like your most classic Gundam or anime storyline about these two rival characters, each of them representing opposing philosophies who come into conflict repeatedly over the course of the story until eventually Fujiyama/Agul joins Gamu as a sort of like reluctant Vegeta-esque character where he's like, you know, I don't know if, you know, I'm fully on your, like, believe in what you're saying, but, like, I still will fight alongside you because maybe there is something about humanity worth saving after all. And there's, like, a little bit of, you know, that twinkle in the eye. And that structure, it's just so good, and it adds this extra sauce to what is already a really well-done Ultraman show. Like, the monsters are really well done, the action's super well directed. One thing this show does that's awesome, that also gives it a Gundam quality, is the whole, like, base and the team of the other people that aren't Ultraman feel like much bigger than in other Ultraman shows. So instead of it being like a group of 5 to 6 people who hang out in a room and have like a big monitor, it's like the monster's attacking, let's get in our jets. It feels like a proper huge organization. They have this giant floating like air fortress that is their base, and you've got multiple different teams. So you've got like 3 different fighter teams that each have like the kind of like groups of 3 fighters. And so like each of them get featured in different stories. Like sometimes it's Team Crow and they will be like the fighter team that goes out, or it's Team Lightning. But you also have like the ground forces that have like a tank and all this stuff. You've got the human rescue team that in some episodes it's like, we got to rescue this person trapped in the building. So it's this part of the force. It's the rescue guys. They're featured. There's the marine guys who like, there's an underwater monster. We call them in. And so there's this whole bigger organization that he's part of. And it kind of feels like when you're on the White Base in Gundam, where it's like, yeah, you've got Amuro and like Bright and Sayla, but also Fraubo is there, and Kai is there, and Ryu is there, and Kobayashi is there, right? Like you have this whole bigger sense, but also Jobjon is there in the background, and you can't forget him. Like you have that quality to it, where there's a whole big family and team kind of running the show. And it really balances all those characters incredibly well. Like even though it has a much, much bigger cast than the other Ultraman show, those characters stand out as well as if not more than lots of characters in the supporting cast, even especially if you're including the classic Ultramans that would always have a couple of people on the cast that just never really got anything to do, and you felt bad for them because it's like they're good actors. It's just like it's hard for the writers to come up with every episode a thing for all 5 people to do. Whereas here, partially because episodes are focused on particular subsections, you get to develop that group. And then, the next couple of episodes will do something with other people. And then you come back to Team Lightning. And it's like, right, this is this guy's deal. And he's got this sort of like running romance with this character's sister. And you kind of revisit those plot points. It's so well structured as a TV show in that way. And so it like all that stuff is super great. But then it is that main pairing between Gamu and Fujimiya, the Ultraman Gaia and Ultraman Agul, that is just the kind of the beating heart of the show. And it's really cool to have this sort of like rival bad guy Ultraman who's not like evil, but he's like a bad boy. He's wearing, it cracks me up because the guy's got like long hair and he's wearing black everything, every single scene. It's always a black pants, black shirt, black jacket. Until eventually he has his kind of like, face turn and he's kind of a pseudo good guy. And then he has a white shirt under his white jacket. So you know that he's a good guy now. But yeah, it's just a super awesome show. It is definitely, if you're someone who's like interested in checking out an Ultraman, you're not sure where to start, you don't necessarily care to do the super old ones because they're janky shows. I love them, but they are janky as fuck, and it's not for. I can definitely see how those shows would be hard for people to get into. I think if you like some of those kind of anime shows I'm describing, Ultraman Gaia is a really great like entry point into getting into some of that Ultraman stuff with some of those other kinds of plot tropes and character devices and stuff laid on top of it. That's like managed super well. Like I think it's a really, really impressive TV show. And is definitely in the modern era of what I've seen, which is not a lot, but in that kind of post the big kind of, Ultraman after Ultraman 80, that kind of 15-year hiatus. This is the best of the 3 of those, and it's high competition. Ultraman Tiga and Dyna are also great. And then it's standing alongside of the classic shows. I would still pull out Ultra 7 as the best if you want that super old school style. But yeah, Ultraman Gaia is awesome. Like Ultraman Gaia is so good that I've actually kind of held off on moving on to the next Ultraman for a little bit because I feel like I need to let it cool off. And I've been watching some other stuff with my dad in the meantime in what is normally our Ultraman time because it just feels like, man, you gotta let. It's such a tough act to follow, and I know that it's a different creative team. I don't know, like the next show might be amazing and might be just as good. I have no idea, but I felt like I needed to like let it rest a little bit because Ultraman Gaia it's the real deal. It's really good stuff.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear. And I love hearing with each of these. I never know what the Ultraman, Wheel of Fortune will bring up for you.
Yes.
And it's fun to hear about these. Yeah. And I looked it up. You can get this show for $13 on DVD on Amazon. I always love looking up the price.
Yes, it is like the value, like it's why I get, even though they're streaming and stuff, you can watch these shows online if you want to, but it's like the value for the physical versions is so good. It's like, I'd be losing money if I didn't buy it. Like they're all so, because you're getting, it's a 51 episode show. All these are basically 4 core shows until eventually they end up being more like 26 episode 2 core things at a certain point. But it's like, yeah, for like $13 you get the 51 episodes of a great ass TV show. Like that, my friends, is a deal.
I love it. All right. Do you have any other stuff you want to go over before we jump into the monthly 10, Sean?
I'll shout out this one thing just because I know we have multiple listeners that always want us to talk about it. I don't go in depth to it because you haven't watched the second season yet, but I have watched the thing that took the place of Ultraman in my watching with my dad time is Andor, where I rewatched the first season of Star Wars Andor, which I'd seen before. When that came out, and then I watched the second season, and then I did also watch Rogue One because I figured I might as well to kind of cap that off. That obviously shows you the climax of the Andor story. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Obviously, like Andor is ridiculously good. The second season is also awesome and is interesting because it's fairly different. Although it does have one thing in common with the first season, which is it does take a couple episodes to get going. Like that's what I had to remember watching the first season again. Because I didn't just watch it with my dad, I also watched it with my mom this time. It was like a whole family time watching Star Wars Andor, but my mom had not watched it before, and it was hard to convince her to come back after we watched the first 2 episodes because it's so slow at the beginning of Andor. It's not until episode 3 where you really get into the Stellan Skarsgård character, Luthen, that show really takes off. Because obviously it's really like, especially season 1, it's really a series of 3-episode movies,
Yes.
that you're kind of like, you have to kind of watch them in chunks, and kind of see them that way. And season 2 kind of has a similar thing. The first 2 episodes are a little rough. And the Cassian Andor's subplot in the first 2 episodes in particular is very bad. It's the worst thing in these, where he's like stranded on this weird planet with 2 different groups of other rebels that are fighting with themselves, and it's just really bad. It just feels like they had to park Andor in a spot while they caught up with all the other expanded cast, because there's this great rich cast of characters. They just didn't know what to do with Andor for the first 2 episodes. Past that, though, season 2 is awesome. It's structured a bit differently than the first season. Season 2 is still your kind of 3-episode chunks. Each chunk of 3 episodes, though, in season 2 takes place in the course of kind of like one moment in 1 year in the rebellion, leading up to basically leaving off to where you pick up with Rogue One, which is obviously right before the events of Star Wars A New Hope, which is when the Battle of Yavin is. They have what is, if you're a Star Wars nerd, a very useful title card. If you're not a Star Wars nerd, a very confusing one, where at the beginning of each of those chunks, it will tell you BBY5. It'll put that on the screen, or BBY4. And if you're like me, I'm like, yes, before the Battle of Yavin 4. This is 4 years before the Battle of Yavin, the pivotal events at the conclusion of the original Star Wars movie, also known as Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, in which the rebellion managed to get their surprise defeat of the Empire by destroying the Death Star. Everyone knows that this is called the Battle of Yavin, where the rebels who launched off of the moon of Yavin 4 defeated the Empire. If you don't have a Star Wars nerd in your watching group, you need somebody to tell everyone, by the way, this is what BBY4 means, because my mom and dad obviously had no idea what BBY4 was. But it's a cool device to say, like, okay, you're kind of marching towards, obviously, both like the conclusion of Andor from what you see in Rogue One, but also you're marching towards the events of the original movies, where like the rebellion fully springs into a complete war, instead of it being this kind of like scattered series of offensives by like splinter groups, which is how the rebellion is depicted both in Andor and in Star Wars Rebels. But the thing that's a bit different with Andor Season 2 is it feels less like these are standalone story arcs. Like, here is the heist arc in Andor Season 1 where they go into the fort to steal the credits from the Imperial payroll. And now here's the prison arc. Like Andor had this like very clear, these are not totally standalone stories, but they were like very defined sets of 3 episodes. Andor Season 2 has this more like, it's a pressure cooker where you're seeing all these pieces build up of like, the pressure is getting piled on more and more by the Empire. You're seeing all the events that are leading to the ultimate creation of the Death Star begin to happen. And you're seeing how much more kind of desperate the rebel forces are, and how they are starting to all unify together on Yavin, these different groups that Luthen, the Stellan Skarsgård character, is kind of tangentially connected to. All those threads are coming together, and it's all going to fucking explode. And that structure starts getting very, very compelling, particularly once you have like the big episode for me, which is episode 8, which is where that pressure cooker goes off for the first time, and you have an event called the Gorman Massacre, which has been a thing alluded to in Star Wars stuff. It's talked about multiple times in Star Wars Rebels as this event that is like this huge shift in the course of the rebellion, because it is the Empire just slaughters a huge number of innocent civilian people for ulterior motives that obviously you learn over the course of the show of like how is this connected to what the Empire is doing with the Death Star. But episode 8 is like an entire episode just depicting the Gorman Massacre. This is one, Jonathan, when you watch it, like I don't know what you teach in film school stuff, but if you have anything that's like, here's a day where we're talking about the use of like physical space and showing physical space in filmed media, like episode 8 of Andor is like one of the most exemplary versions of that I've ever seen, where everything takes place in this one contained area, and how good they are as a production in terms of the writing, the set design, the editing, the direction, and just the conceptualization, where you have all these different characters from all the story threads of the season come together in this one pivotal event where they're all in one spot and shit goes fucking crazy. And it is just a truly incredible piece of direction, and like every piece of that team working on that episode 8, it is like it's like probably one of the best episodes of TV I think I've seen, particularly depicting the thing it's depicting, which is horrifyingly relevant in our day. Like Andor season 1, Andor is only more and more relevant in its depiction of living in a fascist society, which of course we currently do. And then from there, it is still like really good. Like that's like kind of like the peak moment of the season. And then from there, it's like watching how does this turning point where the Empire has gone so far that anybody who's kind of on the line about this rebellion has to pick, like, am I going all in or am I not? And then seeing that rebellion fully form by the end of the show. It's a really, really great season. And it's interesting because it does have a kind of different quality to the first one. Like, there's things I like about season 1 of Andor a little bit more. There's something about having the, like, this is the prison story, and it's got that focus to it that's really awesome. But there's something about the, like, more grandiose nature of season 2 and seeing this, like, long, slow build up and, like, what does that mean? Like, that also has something about it that is hugely compelling. And I like that they went for something fairly different structurally to season 1, and that they're not just trying to do, here's another set of Andor stories. Instead of it being a heist, it's a this, or instead of it being a prison, it's a this. Instead, they're going for a different thing. And it like nails the landing. Like, Andor season 1 was obviously incredible. I think season 2 is just as good in different ways. And it does make Rogue One a more rich movie to watch. I don't love Rogue One. I didn't love Rogue One originally. All of the problems I have with Rogue One are still problems I have with Rogue One. I still think that most of the cast of characters is not particularly well developed. Jyn Erso, the so-called protagonist of that movie in particular, just feels very, kind of like tangential or tertiary when you have an entire TV show building up Cassian, and then you watch that movie, you're like, I'm just here to see what Cassian Andor does. Like, Jyn Erso, like, you could be here, that's fine. Like, obviously you're important to the plot, but she's such a nothing character. It's so clear when you watch that movie again why Diego Luna and Cassian Andor are the things that they're like, we gotta bring this actor, this character back, because that's the thing that works about that movie. That movie still has, like, some of the worst stuff in the kind of first act to second act transition. Like, that whole part of that movie is complete bunk and terrible. But, like, the ending of that movie plays really well when you have much more of a strong connection to Andor as a character. So I'd recommend, if people have not done that, like, I definitely think it's well worth revisiting Rogue One. Even if you're someone like me who didn't love it, I don't think it's going to change your opinion on the movie, but it is a very satisfying thing to kind of revisit that character and that performance from that original version, having all this whole TV show behind it. And I think it holds up well. It holds up better than I thought in terms of, like, that character feeling like he's the guy from the TV show, which I was curious about. Like, would there feel like, after all that development and stuff, would that original take on it still kind of hold water? And I think it does, like, feel authentic. They did enough of a good job connecting all the little pieces to bring him to where he needs to be for that movie, and it's a very smooth transition in that way. So I found that experience pretty interesting as well.
Diego Luna, talented guy, it turns out.
Yeah.
Well, we knew that
Yes.
before, but yes. No, I'm excited to get to Andor. I just have not... I need to, I've been really busy watching other stuff for my classes in the fall. You did mention, showing, if I show this for, something about space, and it did make me think, I am in the fall, Sean, in intro, showing Akira Kurosawa's High and Low for mise-en-scène, because that movie is the best use of blocking in the history of the cinema, particularly for that first hour where it's all in the one apartment set. But yeah, maybe I will have to build in an Andor mention to that lecture. I already have an Andor thing in a different lecture I do. I do a lecture each year about Marvel's Black Panther, and when Andor came out, I added a slide acknowledging the way Black Panther fits into the bad trend of doing the villain has all the progressive ideals, but he kicked too many puppies, so we have to kill him. And I use Andor as a counterexample, and I show the scene of Luthen's big speech and make the point, in a Marvel movie, Luthen would be the villain who they would kill. And in Andor, he's the guy Andor is moving towards that whole season. And so I give that. And actually, that lecture, I think, got a lot better after I added that, counterpoint, because people are really interested in that. So, yeah, Andor is great.
And it's fucking Stellan Skarsgård, holy shit.
Oh, my God, yeah.
He's so fucking good. They what they do with that character is phenomenal in season 2. Everything they do in terms of how they stick the landing on every individual character. Every character gets a great moment to kind of be this is where we leave them off, both in terms of characters from pre-existing Star Wars media. You've got obviously Mon Mothma, who's a big character in Star Wars broadly speaking, but was a big character in season 1. What they do with her is awesome. Obviously they have to, I had a very funny moment where you're eventually they have to give her very 80s-ish haircut from Return of the Jedi. She has to get that haircut again. And eventually, once she's on Yavin, yes, they do give her the haircut. Eventually she has to look like she is from a different decade because they have to be faithful to that. But yes, all those performances are phenomenal. But it is, for me, Diego Luna. If you're not prepared to have if you're a man and you're not prepared to have the biggest man crush in the world, you can't watch Andor, because it's he is just, there's no way to watch this and not have a huge man crush on Andor / Diego Luna. And it's a dangerous rabbit hole to go down to end up looking at interviews with Diego Luna, because then you're well, I just have to watch all of them because he's such a cool person. He's very obviously attractive physically, but then it's he's got so much substance as a guy. It's endless. But
he's
then you also have Stellan Skarsgård,
and he fights fascists. Oh my God, he's the complete package.
in media, in his art, and in real life. And then Stellan Skarsgård in kind of a very different way, but also it's the fucking YouTube rabbit hole I went down with watching interviews of those two guys, where Stellan Skarsgård is in the most I don't give a fuck period of his life, where he's I don't he's in a way that he's enjoying, but he's just yeah, fuck it, whatever. Yeah, the Thor stuff, yeah, I did it. It's yeah, the first one I did was fine, and then but you don't want to do those movies unless you're willing to come back for 5 cameos or whatever. But it pays really well, and he doesn't give a fuck, and it's great. So it's those two guys, their performances in this, but also just the way they carry themselves in the world. You gotta respect Diego Luna and Stellan Skarsgård. They're fucking cool.
Have you ever seen Y Tu Mama Tambien, the movie Diego Luna?
No, I have not.
Yeah.
I need to watch that.
If you want to feel a little weird about your man crush on Diego Luna, watch Y Tu Mama Tambien.
I already feel very weird about it. But
okay. Speaking of weird...
I can add that on top.
Speaking of weird, do you want to do the monthly 10?
Oh, yes. I am very excited for this monthly 10, Jonathan.
I've got some good stuff. So you last month, Sean, challenged me. This is your words. The top 10 superhero / comic book movies that could exist in the infinite multiverse that you most want to see. And so that is how I rank them, is by how much I want to see the ideas I came up with. Sean, my philosophy on this was it was a mix of movies that we know could have happened but didn't. Things like that. Mm-hmm. And then more imaginative, let's say. I did not really, other than kind of one instance, wind up doing the crazy, what if F.W. Murnau did Spider-Man or something like that? Because that just felt like I was demeaning the classic directors. But I think I found a way to have a lot of fun with this. We're going to start sane, and we're going to get gradually more insane. And I think you'll like that.
Yeah, that's the way I like it.
All right. My number 10... totally sane, very on brand for this podcast, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4. I just want that.
Oh, yes.
And I want it to have been produced at the time it was going to be made, which would have been like 2010, 11, 12, which means it also would have precluded the production of The Amazing Spider-Man. That's the other side of this coin, is that I don't just want to see Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4 and maybe get a better overall ending to the the Tobey Maguire Peter Parker than Spider-Man 3 gave us, but I also want to see the alternate history it would have created for Spider-Man if Raimi finished his Spider-Man around 2012. There was no Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. What happens next? Maybe we get a very different MCU Spidey. I don't know. I just want to see that alternate history as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, that there's both, like, the movie itself, is one of those, like, tragedies of, that there were all the stuff you heard about, like, with the Vulture and everything sounded so cool.
Yeah, we would have had John Malkovich as the Vulture. Yeah. We would have had Anne Hathaway as Felicia Hardy. I really want to see this fucking movie.
Yeah, like, it sounded awesome. But then that's a good point, that there's that ripple effect of, like, Amazing Spider-Man presumably wouldn't have happened, but also if Amazing Spider-Man never happens, do you get, like, the Venom movies and Morbius and fucking Craven and Madam Web? Like, the whole weird Sony Spider-Man cinematic universe that doesn't have Spider-Man in it? Like, does that exist in a world where they actually made a Spider-Man 4? Who knows? At the very least, it would be very different, that we would have, all that stuff would have been affected.
Would have been amazing. All right, number 9. The Superman 2 duology, where Richard Donner actually got to finish the movies without Alexander Salkind fucking him. So this is referencing Superman 78. Superman 78 is pretty much the movie Richard Donner wanted to make, although the Turn the World Around ending was taken from Superman 2 due to production overruns. I just want to go to the world where Richard Donner had all the time and resources he needed to finish both of these movies in whatever ideal fashion he thought would have worked. Obviously, Superman 2, we have kind of an idea of what his Superman 2 would have looked like because of the 2006 Richard Donner cut, but that is only a blueprint. That has to use, like, costume test scenes, and all of the scenes with the 3 Kryptonians, Zod's people, were shot by Richard Lester. Donner never shot those scenes. So we don't know what his version of Zod, it would have been the same casting, but we don't know what he would have done with Zod. And I just I think Superman 78 is either the best superhero movie ever made or one of the top 5. And Superman 2 is, like, the great what if, and if we had, like, the fully finished Richard Donner duology, I could argue for this being number 1. It just isn't the most fun number 1, but it's probably the actual in our hearts number 1.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because it's also just easy to kind of forget with so much time has passed that, that whole situation of where he did not really have control over particularly that second movie. Yes, you're right. Like, I think this probably would be a number 1 of, like, if all this was a what if, movie, like superhero movies that got fucked with or never got made, what is the one you most want? This probably would be the number 1 on a pure qualitative way. Yes. I'm with you on that.
I didn't rank it higher because we do technically have these movies. Like, it's not like they're a complete unknown, but yeah. All right, getting a little crazier, Sean, for number 8. I want an Iron Fist movie. But I don't want an Iron Fist Netflix show with some pasty white boy. No. Yeah. What I want is an Iron Fist movie starring Tony Jaa, directed by Prachya Pikanau, choreographed by Pana Ritikrai. This is the team that did Ong Bak, the Mai Tai Warrior, in 2003. They also did Tom Yum Goong in 2005. And Tony Jaa was not in this one, but they also did a movie called Chocolate in 2008. All of those movies absolutely fucking rock. And I was thinking about how you could do a cool Iron Fist movie. And I think you actually would want to avoid just doing the straight Bruce Lee era Shaw Brothers Hong Kong martial arts homage that is the character's origin. One, I don't think you can make this character white anymore. That just Netflix proved that doesn't work. 2, I don't think you can just show familiar martial arts or kung fu styles and then sell the idea of the hidden society of Kamar-Taj that the Iron Fist powers. No, it's not Kamar-Taj. That's Doctor Strange. I forget whatever Iron Fist weird society is. I don't think you can just, like, sell this hidden idea and then have it just be normal kind of Bruce Lee stuff. I think you've got to go a little further afield. And I think going to Mai Tai and then to the extra crazy way that this team of filmmakers deploys and shows all that would be cooler. And nobody's fist in the history of cinema seems more iron than Tony Jaa in Ong Bak. So yeah, he should be Iron Fist. That's my idea.
I love this. I co-sign this idea. It's fantastic. And yeah, I mean, as soon as you said Iron Fist and Tony Jaa, I'm like, yes, no. You're like, yeah, he is Iron Fist. And just like, if you take those words very literally, and yeah, it would be an incredibly brutal fucking movie. But that's, hey, if you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it. Yes. I'm with you.
Assume in all these instances there's no studio interference. They are just given $100 million and get to make whatever they want. And man, if you gave the Ong Bak crew $100 million and no supervision, you'd get something crazy. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, number 7 is the Edgar Wright Ant-Man, as originally conceived before the MCU interference caused him to walk away. To recap, Edgar Wright had been developing Ant-Man for like a decade before the MCU was even a thing, and then when the rights for the character reverted to Marvel, he did almost direct it. He has a writing credit on the movie before Kevin Feige wanted to shoehorn in all the MCU connections, like the big Falcon cameo in that movie, and then they also wanted to soften the Scott Lang character into more of a Paul Rudd type. Really, this is mainly because there just aren't enough Edgar Wright movies in the world. And this is one he genuinely wanted to make. The only reason Ant-Man ever became a movie is because Edgar Wright wanted to do this. That was never a priority of Kevin Feige or the MCU brain trust. Like, Ant-Man is obscure kind of even for them at a certain point.
Yes.
And I just, Edgar Wright is one of the greats. He's got that new Running Man movie coming out this fall that looks fucking fantastic. Have you seen the trailer for that?
No, I have not.
Yeah, it's Glenn Powell, and it just looks great. And just Edgar Wright, I didn't so much love his last movie, Last Night in Soho, but his, Cornetto trilogy movies are amazing. And just, we got robbed here. It's sad.
Yeah, I had forgotten about this one.
Yeah.
And you're right that, like, you're very right that there's no way that we would have gotten Ant-Man in the MCU, like, because he is the lamest superhero, just on the face of it. I mean, Ant-Man is great in his original What If story. That is just by what if I mean like the story of what if a man gets shrunk down to the size of an ant. Like that's like a great old like 60s comic book horror story. It never really works as a superhero. I mean, he was always just kind of like a random Avengers dude, as far as I'm concerned, in the comic books. And yeah, it is like just such a weird character. It would be cool to see someone who was like committed to that, had that level of love for and vision for Ant-Man with Edgar Wright, like clearly to work that hard on it to get that movie to fruition. That would be an awesome alternate universe to live in.
Indeed. All right, my number 6. This is one we all want, but I've fleshed it out a little bit more. We need a Batman Beyond film with Michael Keaton as old Bruce Wayne. Just make this happen, for God's sakes. I want it made, like, basically now-ish, sometime in the 2020s. But I also think to make Batman Beyond with Michael Keaton work, I think you'd want to bring back as much of the Batman 89 crew as you could. Like, Danny Elfman should do the music. Bo Welch should do the production design. He was the production designer on Batman Returns and all of Burton's other stuff. Anton Furst did the original Batman 89, but he died before Batman Returns. So Bo Welch took over. He's one of the greats. I think there's lots of directions you could go for Terry McGinnis. My first thought was that I think it would be cool to have a young actor of color to play Terry McGinnis and go in that direction. I just saw the new F1 movie with Brad Pitt, and his co-star in that is a guy named Damson Idris, who I think would actually be a really good Terry McGinnis. He's got like the right mixture of movie star gravitas, cocky youthfulness, etc. And then it took me a while to figure out, well, who would I want to direct the Batman Beyond film now? And I couldn't really think of anyone. And then I remembered this is the multiverse and I can summon whoever I want. So I want specifically Tim Burton from 1992. I don't want Tim Burton now.
Yeah.
But Tim Burton from 1992, he can do it. And I would trust him for that.
Like, it is shocking that this has not happened.
Yes.
Obviously not we have brought old Tim Burton from a fucking time portal out to make the movie. Like, that I would be very surprised if that happened. It would be a very petty way to reason to use time travel. But, like, it is shocking that Batman Beyond has not been done in live action, specifically, like, with the Michael Keaton connection. I mean, they have done the weird, they did the fucking Flash movie or whatever that obviously has him in it. But it just feels like... And they were going to do that Batgirl movie as well. That obviously
they did do it. They filmed it. They finished it.
Yes.
It's sitting in a vault somewhere.
Yeah, one day, hopefully, that will be exposed in some way. But it just does seem like a very roundabout way of like them desperately doing everything they can to make movies with Michael Keaton as old Batman. That's not somehow a Batman Beyond movie. You don't go to that first is very surprising. I do think I've got a better guy for Terry McGinnis though. What if they just cast Tom Holland as Terry McGinnis?
I don't want to see that movie. That can stay in the multiverse. I'm fine with that. All right. Sean, my top 5 are where this gets good. My top 5 are good. My number 5, you're going to love this. I want a Punisher movie. Directed by John Woo, starring Chow Yun-fat, made in the late 80s / early 90s in Hong Kong in Cantonese. And I mean, I really want them to have had the Punisher license. They could use any of that stuff, but it's not made in Hollywood. It's not made for Marvel. It's not made for any Hollywood studio. It's fully a local Hong Kong production with John Woo allowed to do whatever the fuck he wants. Make it. Back in the past.
Oh my god. Yes, because I wanted to have that quality of where like it's like there are just a handful of recognizably Punisher things, like he's got to have like the skull logo on like a shirt at some point. And obviously it has to have the general thing of he was like a cop whose family got killed and now he's, going killing, which is, a bunch of those movies just have that plot anyways.
Yes.
It's not like the Punisher was particularly original when they came up with that character in the 70s. But yes, this is a great idea. Like, this is just so... I just wanted to have that vibe of you're like, wait, is this like the comic book character Punisher? Like, is it somehow like they got the rights and they made this movie back when Marvel was not really doing live action movies and they couldn't get that to come together? And it's like this one Chinese company got the rights. They're like, fuck it. There's a weird, like... You just find out, like, oh, weird, like, Punisher was, like, a cult character in Hong Kong for, like, 5 years, and just nobody, kind of like what the, like, 1960s Tokusatsu Spider-Man show is. Where you're like, what? Like, how did they made this? And what? It's the what? It's like, fucking, yeah, go for it. I would just want another period, like, historical John Woo, Chow Yun-fat movie back in the day. Just having another Hard-Boiled would make me happy. Just like that was just lost somehow and you found it again. Add the weird spice of it's a random Punisher adaptation on top of it. That's perfect.
The Punisher was always missing doves flying in slow motion as the hero kills people. All right, my number 4. Hear me out. Joel Schumacher's X-Men. So, let me outline this.
Yes.
Hot on the heels of Batman and Robin, which I guess did slightly better in this alternate history, Joel Schumacher is hired by Fox to direct their X-Men movie in place of Bryan Singer. We almost certainly get a worse movie than Singer made, and we never get X2 or any of the good ones. But we do get a more memorable movie that is absolutely gay as hell, proud of it, very campy. No black leather in this one. Everyone is in a colorful costume. They all have nipples on them. The sets look both cheap and expensive at the same time. Everything is massively overlit. Every actor is miscast. More on that in a second. It's very loud. Bryan Singer never achieves the kind of prominence that allowed him to abuse tons of young men. And Hugh Jackman probably just still becomes a star some other way because he's Hugh Jackman. He's fine.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Joel Schumacher's X-Men film winds up being so bad and such a colossal commercial disaster that it effectively kills the superhero movie in its cradle, and the entire history of 21st century blockbuster filmmaking is different, and we can imagine that however we want.
It's an interesting point. I want to hear your casting because it sounded like you had an idea for the cast. Because I want to hear that first. Because I have some ideas as well, but I want to hear what you
So here's what made me put this on the list, Sean. Did you know that in the 90s, when they were prepping to make the X-Men movie we got, Michael Jackson campaigned really hard to play Professor X? He kept badgering the studio to let me play Professor X. They never acknowledged him. But that is a true story. Joel Schumacher would have let that happen. So my idea is that in this X-Men, Charles Xavier is played by Michael Jackson, and Magneto is played by Prince. And that is our dynamic duo in this one. Michael Jackson and Prince, I didn't realize this, born weeks apart. So it totally fits with the ages and everything. So that alone gets this to number 4. I want to see the Michael Jackson Prince, face off as Xavier and Magneto. As Wolverine, I think we're going to cast Gerard Butler, who later appeared in Joel Schumacher's Phantom of the Opera. Yeah. For our villain of the movie...
At least this time he won't be asked to sing anything, you know?
I don't know. This is a Michael Jackson Prince movie, Sean.
I guess that's a fair point.
Okay. For our villain of this movie, we're going to use Mr. Sinister, and he's going to be played by Jim Carrey, who continued working with Joel Schumacher after Batman Forever. He did the number 23 movie. We're going to cast Alicia Silverstone as Rogue. We're going to have Chris O'Donnell, Robin, as Cyclops. We're going to cast Nicole Kidman as Jean Grey. I think we're just going to keep Halle Berry as Storm. I think that still works. And we're also going to have Hank McCoy in this one, Beast, but he's going to be played by Tommy Lee Jones in the blue face paint.
My God.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I love that idea. I mean, obviously it would end up being terrible. Like, yes. It sounds great. The actual movie would be terrible. I've got an addition, Jonathan. Okay. I want that they planned to have a different actor play Iceman, Bobby, one of the original OG X-Men, but they couldn't. Something happened during production and it didn't work out. And so they ended up just having to splice in footage from Batman and Robin of Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze, but now they're just using that footage of Iceman. I don't want him playing Iceman again. I want them to have to clip that together like you're watching an old Toho kaiju movie, and you're like, no, I'm sorry, we destroyed the Rodan costume last time, so we just have to piece together footage from the Rodan movie to have Rodan be in your giant monster movie. I want that. I want Iceman to ask everybody what killed out the dinosaurs, and they're like, I don't know. He goes, the Ice Age, and you're like, but that's not. It was a meteor, though. It's not. That's not. They were dead before the Ice Age. Mr. Freeze and or Iceman, Bobby.
So yes, Sean, would you like to go to the alternate universe where we see Joel Schumacher's X-Men starring Michael Jackson and Prince?
Yes, I can't believe I'm saying this, but yes, I would love to see the Joel Schumacher X-Men movie. That sounds great, Jonathan.
Look, it's more morally defensible than the Bryan Singer one. That's all I'm saying. All right. Well, Michael Jackson, maybe. We'll move on. Number 3, an 80s Fantastic Four movie. And I mean 80s as fuck. This is a Jerry Bruckheimer, Don Simpson production. Directed by Tony Scott, following the massive success of Top Gun in 1986. All right? Here's our cast for this version of Fantastic Four. We're going to have Richard Gere from American Gigolo play Mr. Fantastic. That is the first movie Jerry Bruckheimer ever produced. We're going to have Jennifer Beals from Flashdance play Mrs. Fantastic, Sue Storm.
Okay.
Tom Cruise is Johnny Storm. That was the seed. That was the seed, frankly, Sean, of this entire list. As I was on a walk with my dog, and the thought came into my head of young Tom Cruise as Johnny Storm, and I went, "Oh God, oh God!"
I mean, as soon as you mentioned Top Gun, I was like, this is where we got to go.
So Tom Cruise is Johnny Storm. Val Kilmer will play Ben Grimm in his human form, while Lou Ferrigno will do the physical performance of the Thing.
Yes. Like from the Hulk TV show.
Yes.
But instead of being painted green, he's just painted like orange with some black lines to make it look like there's some rocks.
Yes. Here's an idea I really loved, Sean. The movie I thought about this from is from the 90s, but it still works in the 80s. We're going to get Raul Julia to play Dr. Doom. He played M. Bison in Street Fighter. And actually, this is just genuinely good casting. This is just genuinely, he would have been an amazing Dr. Doom in his lifetime.
M. Bison in that Jean-Claude Van Damme Street Fighter movie is basically Dr. Doom. I mean, that is more Dr. Doom than any live-action Dr. Doom we've had, which is a shocking number of Dr. Dooms, as we learned when we watched the last time. But that whole line about the, like, you know, when I came to your village, it was the most important day of your life, but for me it was a Tuesday.
Yes.
That is the most Dr. Doom-ass thing any character's ever said in a movie.
So we gotta have Raul Julia play Dr. Doom. We're going to have the music by Giorgio Moroder, who also produces a killer #1 soundtrack album that is going to be great. We're going to have lots of music numbers in this, like music video-esque sequences. And the plot is going to have to involve Dr. Doom, the foreign head of a communist state, trying to steal and neutralize the amazing inventions and entrepreneurial spirit of Reed Richards, with the Fantastic Four having to demonstrate patriotic American individuality in the face of Doom's Eastern European hordes. A metric shit ton of cocaine is consumed by the cast and crew while filming.
I love this. Let's get our, like, ridiculous American oorah.
Yes.
Yes, all the way down. Give it to me. I want to see it.
This, again, I was on a walk with my dog when I thought of all this, and it made me mad that this movie doesn't exist. Tony Scott with this cast, all of that, oh my God, it would have been great.
It would be the best Fantastic Four movie.
Yes.
You know? I mean, it's just like, I'm not saying of the Fantastic Four movies we've got, I mean, like, that you could possibly make.
All right, now is where the list gets weird. My number two is Beat Takeshi's Batman. So,
Okay, yeah.
Beat Takeshi, also known as Takeshi, well, he's Takeshi Kitano, also known as Beat Takeshi. But anyway, so here's the alternate. Sean, that is a thing I wrote down in my notes app, just Beat Takeshi's Batman, and then came back to it like a week later and had to flesh this out, because I knew I wanted it, but I didn't know what I wanted it to be. So here's my alternate history. After Batman 89 becomes a global mega hit, Japanese producers acquire the rights for a local remake, and they cast beloved comedian/TV personality Beat Takeshi to play the lead role. However, as production gets underway, Takeshi gradually takes over the film from its intended director, rewriting the script and taking the director's chair. This is what he did on his first movie, Violent Cop. This is how he became a director. So this is just, it's happening on Batman instead of Violent Cop. From a relatively faithful adaptation about the son of a Japanese business tycoon whose parents are killed by the Yakuza, Takeshi transforms the film into the story of a low-level Yakuza, played by him, whose beloved Aniki is killed by a rival gang while they're out enjoying a game. He swears revenge, taking a bat from the field and gradually hunting down the enemy Yakuza and killing them with the bat. Thus he becomes Batman. It's extremely violent, including a scene where we watch Batman interrogate a rival Yakuza with his bat in an unbroken 5-minute take, hitting him over and over again. That's a thing that happens just with slapping in Violent Cop. But much of the film is actually about Batman on the trail of some Yakuza who've gone to hide out in the countryside, traveling rural Japan, getting into quirky misadventures, existential quandaries, and continually contemplating suicide, all while beautiful Joe Hisaishi music plays. He dies at the end, of course. There are absolutely no references to the DC Comics character Batman other than the title. It wins the Golden Lion at Venice in 1992.
This is incredible. Can we have like one shot where he does have like a bat tattoo, Yakuza bat tattoo on his back, but was like shot before he took over the movie, and so it's like from like a previous version where he was going to be a Yakuza version of Batman before he became Batman?
Yes. That was what I first wrote down, is that maybe he does like a bat dragon tattoo on the back. But then I remembered Beat Takeshi has a whole movie about baseball called Boiling Point. And I thought it was, and then I wrote, oh no, he can be Batman. That's funnier. That's funnier. So this is Beat Takeshi's award-winning Batman.
Yes. And it's just, you watch the whole movie and you're in the fucking credits and you're like trying to process what the fuck you saw. And then all of a sudden the DC Comics logo comes up at the end and you're like, wait, what?
Yes.
It's like, Batman. Oh, Batman. I get it. Wait, what? And you're like even more confused than you already were.
Yes.
I love it. All you just explained that just made me right. It's been a long time since I've seen any of his movies. I need to watch Sonatine again.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, I feel like this would be a mix of Violent Cop, Boiling Point, Sonatine, and Hanabi, but with Batman. But not that Batman. A man with a bat. All right, my number one. It could be nothing else, Sean. It's Paste Pot Pete, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, starring Daniel Day-Lewis as Paste Pot Pete, also known as, I had the name up. Where was it? Peter Petruski, I think is his name. Peter Petruski, Paste Pot Pete, later known as Trapster. He's not becoming Trapster in this movie. He's Paste Pot Pete. This is an old joke from like 15 years ago on this podcast of a Paste Pot Pete movie starring Daniel Day-Lewis going full method. But yes, specifically this movie would have been made sometime between 2018 and 2024, alongside the other Sony Spider-Man Without Spider-Man Villains Universe movies. So this would technically be one of the Venom, Madam Web, Craven, Morbius movies, but...
This is Sony wanting to make their own Joker.
Yes, exactly. But they get a real director. They get Paul Thomas Anderson. He gets Daniel Day-Lewis out of retirement again. And then, you've got to flesh out the cast. So... in the comics, Paste Pot Pete was originally introduced as a Fantastic Four enemy who was annoying Johnny Storm. So you've got to have the Fantastic Four. So here's another dream cast for the Fantastic Four, Sean, but with actors who have either appeared in or I think could appear in Paul Thomas Anderson movies. They're young. So I think for Mr. and Mrs. Fantastic, you get Cooper Hoffman and Alana Hayim, who were in Licorice Pizza. That is Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, Cooper Hoffman, and Alana Hayim, one of the members of the band Hayim. And then for Johnny Storm, it's Timothée Chalamet. Just, that's who it's got to be.
Yep.
And for The Thing, we're going to do Paul Dano, because that makes me laugh. He was in There Will Be Blood. He's very angsty.
Yep.
I really want to punch him. I think he'd be good as The Thing. But then, in the comics, I didn't know this, when fighting the Fantastic Four, Paste Pot Pete becomes part of the Frightful Four, a group of villains that also includes the Wizard, the Sandman, and Medusa. And they're going to be played by, the Wizard will be Josh Brolin, who appeared in Inherent Vice, in my favorite Josh Brolin performance of all time. Sandman, I think we're going to go with Benicio del Toro, who also was in Inherent Vice.
Okay. Yeah.
And for Medusa, we're going to cast the great British actress Leslie Manville, who was in Phantom Thread, and I believe was nominated for an Oscar for that movie. And they will join Daniel Day-Lewis in trying to take down these fucking youngsters, the Fantastic Four, in Paste Pot Pete. And the music will be by Johnny Greenville, of course.
Fantastic. Can there be a single horrible post-credit scene where, like, Kraven from the Kraven the Hunter movie comes in, and they have to, like, they couldn't possibly have Daniel Day-Lewis be in an actual scene, so it's, like, just edited in the most awkward way, where they're trying to construct a thing where to get Kraven from the Kraven movie to be like, you gotta join, we've got a bigger team that you have to join to take down the Spider-Man.
Bring your paste.
Can we just have...
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And actually... in the movie you're talking about, Morbius has a Michael Keaton appearance in it.
Yes.
That is how they did it. It's a different actor on set, and then they CGI'd Michael Keaton's head onto him. So I think not only that, Paul Thomas Anderson refuses to direct it, Daniel Day-Lewis refuses to show up on set, they have some hack do the Kraven half of the scene, and then I think they just use deleted scenes from the movie with Daniel Day-Lewis to fill in the alternate half of it with a body double on set, and that's how they do it, yes.
Yeah, because I just need that one extra kernel so you know that it somehow this movie is connected to the madness that is the Sony cinematic Spider-Man whatever. I don't want it to infect the actual movie, but there should just be this weird vestige, this parasite nibbling at the toes of this film that you just can't fully ignore.
Also, Daniel Day-Lewis does win his record 4th Oscar for this movie. Because if fucking Joaquin Phoenix could win an Oscar for The Joker, Daniel is taking home his 4th Oscar for Paste Pot Pete.
Yes, I want to hear whoever's hosting the Oscars or whoever's doing that segment have to say, and winner of Best Actor, Daniel Day-Lewis for Paste Pot Pete, and everyone's cheering and clapping.
I'm basically imagining him playing him with the same sort of voice and demeanor as Lincoln, but he's holding a paint can as he goes around, I want this movie so bad, Sean.
It's a movie we've both been dreaming up for most of our adult lives, really, which is kind of a sad thing to say, but it is fairly true.
All right, that's my top 10. Do you have one of these that you are personally most excited to come out of the wormhole?
Oh my god. The John Woo Punisher movie. Okay. I mean, that's the one. That's for me. That's the one that, like, if I had to pick one of these to watch, it would be that or... I mean, obviously, I Spider-Man 4 is a big one. But yeah, I do think it would be the John Woo Punisher or it would be Takeshi Kitano's Batman.
Yes. But it's just because there's a bat. All right. Sean, for August, you are next up to do a top 10 list. You're in the barrel. So, in the spirit of our fantastic 4x4 episode from last month, and how much you complained about doing Dragon Ball GT on Japanimation Station, I want to know, what are the top 10 podcast topics you would most dread doing on this show? Or any show. They can be topics we've actually talked about and someone has vetoed, or they can just be ones of your own invention. What are the 10 that would cause you the most misery that you would just bitch and moan about the longest if I made you do?
I feel very conflicted about this list. It's like giving, it's like Sherlock Holmes giving Moriarty like a list of like, here's all of my weakness in Baritsu, my Japanese martial arts. Like this is it's just I'm giving Lex Luthor a fucking bucket of kryptonite is basically what you're asking me to do.
Well, maybe it has to be a kind of mutually assured destruction where you try to make it something I would hate too. Yeah.
But unfortunately, even though I'm conflicted about it, I'm cursed by our gentleman's deal that I must make this top 10 list. So I will, to the best of my ability, make a top 10 list of podcast topics I would most dread to do.
All right, and that wraps it up for the monthly stuff. We will be back later in July, probably in about 2 weeks. We'll at least do an episode about Superman, the James Gunn Superman. Fantastic Four comes out near the end of the month, so maybe that'll have to wait until the August monthly stuff. But we'll be back in a couple weeks. We will at least talk about Superman, maybe more. That'll be our topic for July, and we'll see you then.
Yeah, and it's, hey, we're talking about a new superhero movie. We have not done that in a very, very long time.